What's up everyone, how are you all? Today we are back with another blazing Naruto story. What if Naruto back with Yugito and a dark power? If you enjoy then please like, share and do comments. And also check the description box to original creation of this beautiful creation. Naruto was running from a crowd of angry civilians and shinobi, just as he always was. He thought he saw an Anbu in there, too. The thought of such strong shinobi coming after him spurred his little legs to carry him faster. He turned into an alley, only to find it was the last thing he needed in this situation, a dead end. Shit, Naruto mentally cursed. Due to his lifestyle, he was privy to all sorts of colorful language, so, at the age of 4, he knew enough curse words to make a sailor blush. He turned around to escape, only to find he was cut off by the mob he was trying to evade. "Ah crap," he muttered as he backed away from them until his back was to the brick wall. "Now we got you, demon. We're gonna finish what the Yondaime started. This is for my father. And my brother." These among other things were yelled by the civilians and shinobi as they fell upon him, brandishing pocket knives, broken bottles, kunai and shuriken in the case of the shinobi, and a tanto in the case of the Anbu. He closed his eyes and awaited the pain. They did not disappoint. Not an inch of skin on Naruto's body was left unscathed. The villagers and shinobi were very thorough in their lashing. They began with severing his Achilles tendons, letting him collapse and they fell upon him, raking their weapons across his skin. Some of the crueler shinobi twisted their kunai in his flesh, merely adding to the pain. Only when the Anbu parted the crowd to serve the killing blow did things go south. He raised his tanto in the air and swung it down, right on the seal on his stomach. As soon as it made it halfway through his tiny body, everything froze, and his world was pain. In his head, he heard the snarling of an animal, only for it to fade as if it were growing in distance from him, power coursing through his veins, burning his body as it changed. Unbeknownst to him, he held the Kyuubi no Kitsune within him, but not for long. Due to the idiocy of that particular Anbu, the seal was broken, and Kyuubi's power flooded young Naruto. But instead of completely destroying his small body, and freeing the strongest Biju that devastated the village 4 years ago, it awoke something far worse. The blood of a greater demon locked away in Naruto's genes. As it writhed in rage, the strongest Biju sensed the approaching presence of this greater demon within his prisoner. Its crimson eyes widened in shock, then fear. The Kyuubi did not feel fear. The Kyuubi had nothing to fear. Nothing but that. This presence was something the Kyuubi never thought it would feel, for this was a great and terrible thing to cause it such abject and palpable fear. The died fearing for its life, and actually fearing for the land. Onikage. It grumbled as the darkness finally overtook its gargantuan form. In the end, the Kyuubi died and Naruto lived. He survived. He evolved. The sheer force of the Kyuubi's chakra threw the mob away in a shockwave, as a new Naruto slowly stood up, his cocoon of shadow shattering off of his frame. His blonde hair, dirtied with blood and mud, was now pitch black, shadowing his eyes. As he raised his head, they saw his whisker marks were gone, and now replaced with a thin almost circle from his forehead to ending just under his eyes. Lines going horizontal from the corners of his eyes and a vertical at the top of the arc. They then noticed his eyes. They were no longer cerulean, empty with pain and a broken child. His eyes were an empty black, save for a red slit as his pupils. They looked to his hands, clenched in fists, unfurling to show obsidian claws for fingernails. They watched as the shadows around the boy, including his own shadow, slithered to him, covering his body. Strangely, the darkness formed new clothes for him. Instead of the white shirt and green pants he had scrounged up, he now wore a black hoodie, the hood up now, covering his mop of black hair and shadowing his faces, but those damnable crimson lines glared at them in the shadows. The hoodie was open, a high-collared vest under it that covered his face from the nose down, but what was on the collar frightened them. Teeth. No, that wasn't completely right. Following the line of his neutral lips on the collar was a set of fangs, wicked teeth that could rend flesh. And they looked real, as they shined in the moonlight, sticking off of the surface of the fabric. Just after they spied the fangs, horns of equal material formed from his forehead, sticking to it like a mask while not actually growing through his skin, curling over his hood. On his back, ominous purple flames came to life, sinking into the fabric, forming the kanji for Onikage, much like how the Yondaime's cloak had his rank as such. His cloak seemed to have a built-in sheath, as a black sheath with intricate gold design starting halfway down and to the bottom was lodged in a cylindrical clasp within it. He stuffed his left hand into the pockets of his black jeans, leading to his steel-toed boots. Slowly, he raised his right hand out to them and snapped his fingers, his hand turning into black flames. He held the open palm to the crowd and only said one thing, the last thing they would hear from anyone at all. Black hole. He suddenly slammed his hand on the ground, the black flames spreading over the ground faster than any of the mob could react. When they realized it didn't hurt them, they sneered at the demon for using such a useless technique and prepared to continue their onslaught, only to be stopped as a man near the back shrieked in alarm. Looking to him, weights dropped in their stomachs as they saw him sinking into the obsidian flames. Soon, other members of the crowd followed suit, yelling in fear as the abyssal fire engulfed them. Some of the shinobi reacted fast enough and jumped onto the adjacent buildings they were between and began throwing their kunai and shuriken at Naruto. The shadows immediately around him seemed to freeze and flatten, as quick tendrils of the black abyss shot up, deflecting the projectiles with ease. Looking closely, they could see sneering jaws and leering eyes within the darkness protecting him, and grew fearful. The Anbu appeared within his guard and swung his tanto, removing Naruto's hand from his arm. They fell onto the flaming ground, the darkness swallowing the civilians parting for them, showing the normal dirt underneath. Suddenly, a black smoke with a crimson glow emanated from the cut wrist, soon engulfing the hand as the same smoke wafted from his wrist and reformed his hand. He clenched his hand to renew the feeling and turned to the Anbu that dared to attack him. Thrusting his right hand into the chest of the Anbu, instead of drawing blood, his hand sunk into the skin as if it were water and he infected the Anbu's heart with darkness, turning it into a core that would begin the process of giving the Anbu a higher purpose. Soon the Anbu was seized by black nothing, broken down and reshaped to fit his nature. Despite the spirit of the Anbu, he did not keep his individuality or any defining characteristics. He became a shade, a hollow shell. Keeping a humanoid shape, this shade was a spindly thing, twitching just a tad now and then. Its body was shaped as if it wore a form-fitting suit with clawed hands and feet. It had dark gray skin, black fangs on the outside of its lips instead of in its mouth, and a single blazing red eye, a black barbed pattern across its entire body. The eye traveled along this pattern, looking around until it returned to the face and stared at Naruto. The shade twitched as it bowed to him. Naruto smirked at what an elite Anbu became, showing his longer canines. He pointed to the remaining shinobi, and the shade nodded, sinking into its own shadow and slithering across the ground, up the wall, and across the roof to behind one of the shinobi attacking Naruto, his projectiles still deflected by his protective darkness, his own smirk matching some of the ones within the blackness of his shield. He eyed the Chunin with mirth as the remnant of its own ally shoved a clawed hand through his chest, converting his heart the same way Naruto did that formed the shade, and made itself a brother. They set about eliminating the remaining shinobi. The last one left grew extremely fearful. The black fire along the ground was gone, as were the civilians that sunk into its embrace, no remains left. His allies against the demon turned into things for its bidding, and the demon set his sights on him. Naruto decided to make an example of him to the entire village, and tapped into his large chakra coils that now held the entirety of Kyuubi, the demon forever erased from existence, the process of his rebirth giving Naruto his power and knowledge. He was soon engulfed in a shroud of black chakra, the very center, around his stomach, filled with white lights, like stars in the night sky, one tail swaying behind him. The shroud took the shape of a fox, but had some added features, as the symbol on his face grew. The ends of the arc curving to go down his cheeks until they reached the corners of his lips, though hidden by the high collar, with the teeth actually opening like a functioning mouth. The horns upon his brow shifted forward, creating Biju chakra echoes in the cloak. He made sure to flood the village with the foul feeling of his chakra, and disappeared in a burst of speed. The Chunin was terrified. The demon showed its true colors, killed his comrades, and was now after him. Before he could even scream or run in terror, his life was ended with a sweep of Naruto's claw, the only sign of his existence being a bloody smear on the ground and walls. Naruto dispersed his chakra cloak and jumped down to his small army of 15. Hide in the dark, I shall call you. The old fool and his men approach. Do what you will until you hear me, but do not draw attention to yourselves or me. He ordered, his voice noticeably deeper. The shades showed no outward reply, only sinking into their shadows and slithering into the surrounding darkness. Just when the last was gone, Hiruzen appeared, flanked by his personal guard of elite Anbu. He sneered as he felt the ill intentions of all but three of them. The one with gravity-defying silver hair in the Inu mask, the woman with long purple hair in the Neko mask, and the brown-haired man who seemed to be wearing some odd face guard under a Tora mask. Greetings, Hokage-sama, so good of you to join me after the damage is done. Naruto intoned coldly, sneering at Hiruzen for arriving to the party after he just got done with his own brand of festivities. Sarutobi frowned at the manner in which Naruto spoke to him. Naruto was only respectful when he was pissed. You will show respect to Hokage-sama, demo. An idiot Anbu yelled, only to be silenced by a tendril of darkness lashing out from Naruto's shadow, filleting his body and splattering his blood amongst his colleagues and the Hokage's robes, smirking all the while. He enjoyed the shocked face of the Sandaime he could see, as well as the shocked stances of the Anbu, except the three who held no ill will towards him. Perhaps they believed he deserved it? Odd. Naruto, you did not need to kill him. He was spouting nonsense. Hiruzen snapped at the ex-blonde, hoping to keep Naruto's once secret of his status as such. Oh, come off it, old man, when I was reborn, I knew. Naruto quipped back, smirking at Hiruzen's shocked visage. He knew? What does he mean, when he was reborn? Perhaps it could explain this sudden change, and that power he just used. Hiruzen mused in his head. In case you're wondering, when the damnable Anbu partaking in our little party stabbed me in the stomach, he did what you all wanted, excluding you four. He added, pointing towards Hiruzen and the three, whom he decided to refer to as the Understanding. The Kyuubi is dead, he finished. Sarutobi was shocked beyond belief. Minato's seal was supposed to drain the Kyuubi into Naruto's chakra coils once he was 18. He's only 4, or rather, he was 4 before that happened. He eyed the new Naruto, noticing he was taller, leaner, toned, and his voice was deep, reminding him of a man scorned by his enemies in war. Impossible, you're still here. Another Anbu yelled, only to be flayed by the tendril from before. Now, children, daddy's telling a story, best not to interrupt. Naruto chastised, speaking to the group as if they were all 5. With the breaking of my father seal, Kyuubi plunged into my system. But I did not die, he did. I hold the power of a demon's blood now, the greatest and most feared demon in all history. With its awakening came my rebirth, he said with a flourish of his hands down his new form. With my rebirth came power. Naruto demonstrated as his hands burst in black flames and the shadow that killed the 2 Anbu writhed around him, tendrils waving, eyes leering, jaws cackling and sneering. Crimson dots opened within the shadows of the alley, watching everything. I speak this message only once. Do not cross me, or you will die. That goes for you, too, old man. Naruto threatened Hiruzen, shocking everyone. The Onikage has returned, and he is on the warpath. Naruto added, breaking down into black squares and flying out of the village, leaving the elite to mull over what just transpired. Naruto just waged war on all of Konoha from within. And from what he showcased during his tirade, he might win. Hokage Tower. After his message was sent, Naruto sent a Yami Bunshin, darkness clone, to the Hokage Tower. Creeping its grasp along the wall, the clone sunk its hand into the crevices around the safe behind the picture of his father and filled the lock mechanism with darkness, forcing it to unlock, opening the safe and popping the picture off, catching it with care. While at first, Naruto resented the man for sealing the Kyuubi within him, but if he didn't do so, Naruto would not be reborn. As he retrieved the scrolls his parents left him, he also took the picture of the Yondaime, a keepsake. He also stole the forbidden scroll of seals, pocketing all he took in the darkness of his jacket, the bottomless pocket dimension holding them. He made his way to the Nara estate and made copies of their shadow and darkness techniques, respecting one of the few friends he had as a child and not stealing from them. He then appeared at the unmanned north gate out of Konoha. As he faced the great unknown, his legion of shades appeared behind him. Grow our army. Take the civilians and Anbu, but spare the understanding and shinobi. They might be worthy allies or worthy enemies. Regardless, they will live for now, on a whim. Bring to me those who have potential to be greater than shades. He ordered, silent as the shades awaited to do his dark work, relishing in the first screams of the civilians as they were slaughtered by dark creatures that walked from the shadows of their homes. He then made his own journey away from the hell he once called home. He didn't know where he was going, but he knew it was away from here. Away from those who didn't understand. 5 hours later, Naruto kept walking through Hai no Kuni, deciding, on a whim, to head to Oni no Kuni. How appropriate. He felt the rush of cold embrace as his shades returned to him, greater in number. He was slightly disappointed that none of the Anbu were strong enough to garner anything above shades. He was surprised when one of them brought him a civilian, a shrill thing, disgustingly pink and unbearably loud. When she shrieked in fear and indignation, he understood why. She might make a banshee-like creature. Silence, Naruto said plainly, but the girl listened. Name? He asked, ordered. Haruno S. Sakura. She answered, quivering before him. Pitiful. A stronger person would stand tall before their death. Stronger still would embrace the chance to serve him. But she was a child, so it might be forgiven. Rethinking these things, he mused his Onikage blood made him think himself a king or some demigod. Welcome to the fold, Naruto greeted, confusing Sakura until he plunged his hand in her chest, extracting her heart and adding it to his bountiful collection from what the shades brought him, while he also rewarded them with a few. He was a benevolent king. He would praise those who did his work to his expectations, more so if they soared higher. Finding that he lost not one of them as they worked through the supposed strongest shinobi village, garnered such. He watched as the writhing girl changed. At first, he thought she would merely become a shade, but her last death shriek burst through, and he relished as it distorted with evil and corruption, watching as she indeed became a banshee creature. Her new form was a creature similar to the shades, but the lower body was robe-like instead of a pair of legs. It was noticeably female with wider hips and a small bust. Last was its face. It didn't have eyes, but it had a small pair of human lips, smiling softly in a sharp contrast to the shades. The upper half of its head degenerated into soft hair swept back and down its neck. It suddenly opened its mouth, revealing the dainty mouth to be false, as it had massive fangs within its gaping maw, the mouth large enough to engulf an adult's head. Its hair snapped outwards, revealing it to be tendrils, as they lashed in the air. Its dainty hands morphed into claws as spikes suddenly formed up its arms and it shrieked to the heavens, nearby woodland creatures dropping dead as the sound eradicated their souls and burst their eardrums. Naruto signaled for it to stop and it quieted down, reverted to its docile state and approached him and pecked him on the cheek with its perpetually smiling lips, shoulders shaking as if it giggled before it sunk into its shadow. Naruto shook his head at the affectionate creature and went on his way. Moving along his journey, he thought over how he took care not to injure a single shinobi, Anbu notwithstanding. He planned to return to his home in the future. He had plenty of time to wait. Stopping in the middle of his path, he had an idea. Surely those who were worthy of him would sprout up in the world. Agreeing with himself, or perhaps some persona within his mind, he thrust his hand within the ground, black veins spreading throughout the dirt. He watched as they slithered to parts unknown. Find those who would be worthy to our cause, was his order. He created a net of shades that would examine several areas in the elemental nations for those he might deem worthy of joining his cause. About an hour later, he received a mental pull. Allowing it, he stood in the middle of the road as his mind wandered to where it would be taken. Looking through his link with a shade, he found it was in Kumogakure and watching a woman. A beauty of one, she moved with feline grace as she dodged the lecherous hands of drunks, the men spouting off nonsense of bagging the demon bitch. Realizing this was one of his former kind, he felt action was to be taken. Condensing his body to darkness, he fell into the mental link, his form appearing with the shadow that showed him such things. He growled lowly as the lumbering, fat men managed to corner the woman. Walking up behind them, he cleared his throat to garner their attention. One of the men grunted, looking over his shoulder. Naruto made eye contact with the blonde woman, a chunin by the uniform. He nodded to her as if telling her he was here to help, but also questioning how a chunin of a very militaristic village was cornered. Spying a dart in her neck and her pale face and her knees shaking, he concluded these men drugged her to weaken her. Disgusting. Wait turn, brat. The man chastised in a drunken slur. On the contrary, Naruto quipped, thrusting his hands through both their chests, splattering their blood on the ground and walls, taking caring not to stain the woman's clothing. He corrupted their hearts and engulfed them in darkness, sure that they would become something other than a pair of shades. He was not disappointed when they appeared just as large, but not necessarily with fat. They were like a pair of walls, shades bulked up with muscle and rock-like armor, mostly across its back, as their heads remained a normal size, tiny compared to the new bodies, and their arms were like tree trunks. The armor formed to be two halves of a spiked shield, which they created by bringing together their arms in front of them, an impenetrable defense of shadows. Naming them Gardenas, Naruto dismissed them into the darkness. He approached the stunned woman and removed the dart from her neck, using his dark chakra to heal her weakness from the obtrusive device without her doing anything to stop him, too shocked at what she just saw. She was snapped out of her stupor when the man who saved her closed her slack mouth and patted her on both cheeks. Now, mustn't gape, you'll attract flies. Naruto commented. What the hell was that? She suddenly yelled. Naruto winced at her volume. Please speak lower, I detest loud people. Banshee notwithstanding, of course. Remembering what he did to those two bastards, she heeded warning that wasn't really there. Sorry, but what did you do? She asked. I put them to good use. Though their hearts will suffer for their transgressions, I despise rapists. Now, let's go, Naruto ordered. Idly following him, she questioned exactly what he meant by go. Go, where? Why, out of the village. I offer you a better life, power, and freedom. He spun around, his coat swinging in a flourish. Realizing she was being offered a chance to leave her own semi-hell of a home, she followed him. Why'd you help me? I'm just a monster, she said, rubbing her arm. Come now, is that how you speak of yourself to your once brethren? Naruto teased. What the hell are you talking about? She asked. Well, miss. Naruto left his sentence hanging, hoping for her to fill in the blanks. Ni Yugito. She answered. Naruto nodded. Uzumaki Naruto. Well, Miss Ni, I was once a Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi. I know you hold the Nibi. Naruto explained. Yugito's eyes widened and she suddenly brandished a pair of kunai, crossing them around his shoulders to against his neck. How do you know that? Last I heard, the Kyuubi Jinchuriki was in Konoha. She hissed. I could smell her. Naruto answered, whispering in her ear as he appeared behind her, out of her lethal grasp. Yugito shuddered at his hot breath but steeled herself. Come to make me a weapon of your home? She accused of him. Naruto merely scoffed. Hardly. I left that cesspool once I achieved my rebirth. I planned to burn the village to the ground. Naruto explained. Yugito's eyes widened. Why? It's your home, she said, only to be met with an indignant snort. Hardly. They treated me as if I shouldn't be alive, that I should be thankful for any attention, negative or otherwise. I was reborn through means of trying to kill me. Naruto explained. You keep mentioning rebirth. What do you mean? She asked. I was born in the blood of the Onikage. He said. Yugito was confused until Nibi shrieked in his head. Onikage? For the love of Kami, Yugi-chan, don't piss this kid off. He could kill us in a second. Just go with him, a future with him is better than contentment here, Matabi insisted. Yugito seized her head as Nibi's shrieks gave her a headache. I see what you mean by detesting loud people. She muttered to Naruto, who merely chuckled. What's the Onikage? This time she asked Matabi. The Onikage was the greatest and most feared demon in all of Makai. His power rivaled that of the Jubi, the great demon the 9 Biju were previously a part of. His prowess over shadows, darkness, and the void was seen in no other, and his legion of shadow walkers took everyone under his thumb. No one dared not turn against him. Nibi explained, causing Yugito's eyes to widen for the third time today. Rivaling the 10 tails? She repeated in a whisper. Plus, he was a god in bed. Nibi added with a perverted giggle, her mind wandering, Yugito blushing. She just had to ruin the moment with her perversion. But on a more serious note, he was said to give his mates a sliver of his power, and they became more powerful than one could imagine. The greatest of them could rival the Hachibi, she added. I assume she got to the part where my mates, should I take any, are given great power? Naruto interrupted, assuming such when Yugito blushed. Yugito jumped a bit, blushing that she was caught at that section. She nodded and added rather shyly, shuffling her feet in the dirt, her hands behind her back. Yes, she said meekly. You're just trying to adorable your way to that power, aren't you? Naruto deadpanned. Yugito blushed worse at his choice of wording. He found her adorable? Well, I suppose if you're joining me, it only makes sense. Naruto seemed to admit. Yugito blushed even worse. So does that mean I'm MMPH? She started, only to be muffled by Naruto seizing her lips with his own. Surprised, she slowly fell into the kiss, wrapping her arms around his shoulders as he did her waist. Naruto's lips wandered from her lips, kissing their way to her neck, causing her to mewl and moan, and he bit down on the junction between her neck and left shoulder, injecting her with a sliver of his power, causing her to let out an orgasmic moan. Naruto stepped back, though with some difficulty, as she seemed to be rather clingy as she writhed in the pleasure of the power coursing through her veins. He watched as she was engulfed in black flames and could feel the power pouring off her. The flames were doused, and Naruto looked at the reborn Yugito. Naruto merely chuckled with her. I did nothing. The darkness that molded you formed you into a vessel it believed appropriate. The original Onikage was known for various concubines, and thus reacted accordingly, independent of either of our wills. Obviously it evolved you to how you probably would be as a full adult. Where you, 14, 15? He guessed, not waiting for an answer. It did the same to me. I'm technically 4, believe it or not, and the Onikage blood evolved me into this. He said, to her gobsmacked expression. Now come on, that influx of chakra of a foreign nature was sure to alert the. He stopped when he turned around, finding a squadron of Volt, Kumo's Anbu, facing him. Authorities. Naruto finished plainly, glaring at the small group before him. He slowly spun around to look at Yugito. Oh Yugi-chan tilde, take care of them, have fun with your new powers. Naruto asked of her eccentrically, sinking into his own shadow and appearing behind the squadron on a nearby rooftop, causing them to whip around in shock as he sat and watched. The two members closest to her died instantly, their hearts engulfed in darkness overtaking them. Naruto watched on from a distance to see what her work yielded. He was surprised to find the Volt became entirely new creatures. Instead of the bipedal humanoid shades, these Volt became wolves, maintaining clawed feet, but their chests and heads grew to those of wolves, and several large spikes grew down their spines, bladed limbs bursting from their shoulder blades and folding against their backs, a whip-like tail growing from their tailbones. The spikes along their backs sparked with electricity that arced between them. These were blitzwolves. He watched as Yugito slaughtered the squadron much like how he did after his rebirth, aided by her new creations. She had all the powers he attained, though weaker of course, and augmented versions of them. For instance, her tendrils of darkness that he used as a shield whipped out of her fingertips, or she could extend her nails into claws, reminding him of his banshee's own. She also seemed to have a sort of blade of darkness that grew with a swipe of her hand or foot and, most curiously, a thin strand of darkness whipped out from her tailbone, skewering a Volt in the brain when it tried to sneak up on her. He watched as she manipulated the black flames from when he used Black Hole on that crowd and used it in a very Kaden-like technique, throwing around black fireballs. He almost jumped to her aid when she lost her left hand, but stopped when he saw the telltale signs of its regeneration with the black-red glow smoke taking its place. He smirked and jumped down to her once she finished, letting her corrupt all their hearts and turn a few of them into blitzwolves. Very nice, Yugi-chan. Naruto applauded, clapping for her. Yugito giggled and sauntered over to him, putting an extra sway in her hips and quickly whipped around, leaning against him as she hung off his shoulders, looking up at him with the back of her head on his chest and her rather ample behind rubbing against a certain part of his anatomy. I aim to please, Naruto-kun. She cooed, licking just under his chin. Naruto shuddered but remained steadfast. They had to leave before garnering more unwanted attention. Not now, Yugi-chan, he said sternly, though he stepped out of her grasp while pinching her behind, eliciting a squeak from her. We must leave before more appear. Before we leave, is there anyone you want to take with us before we do? Naruto asked, only to find Yugito looking fearful as she looked behind and above him, pointing shakily. Confused, Naruto put his hand behind him, coming in contact with a rather stern surface. Traveling his hand upward, he found the Raikage standing right behind him. Not happy at the scowl on his face, Naruto felt alluded to anything. Well, this is interesting. I say what we do is fuck this shit. Naruto yelled, suddenly trying to run away, only to find he was seized by the hood of his clothing, his legs getting him nowhere. He was lifted into the air by said hood, and gave up trying to escape. One might ask why he didn't just use his control over darkness to free himself, or perhaps injure or even kill the Raikage, but the odd thing was, he sensed no ill will from the man. "Hello, sir," Naruto greeted, brought up to his face, seeing his sharp beard, mustache, and swept back hair, all of it yellow-white. "What do you think you are doing?" A yelled. Naruto thanked Kami. The high collar shielded him from the flying spit of the irate Cage. He decided to tell the truth. "Nothing tilde, okay, maybe not." Yugito was hard-pressed to just not fall over laughing at Naruto's actions. First, he feels up the Raikage and kinda lingers on his face, surely messing with him. Then his pitiful escape was just hilarious. Now he decided to fuck with her adoptive father. Naruto's smart aleck remark earned him a bump on his head, which he did not react to, except for the small tear hanging off his right eye from the pain, purely for comedic reasons. "Ow, I see you want the truth. Well then." Naruto then explained how he arrived here, saving Yugito from the two would-be rapists, surprised as the Raikage went into a sense of rage, as most cages wouldn't care about the goings-on of an individual shinobi, but placated him when Naruto explained he killed them. Then, he admitted to trying to take Yugito out of the village, and the subsequent squad of Volt impeding their progress, to which he explained Yugito clearly whipped their sorry asses. Saying that all with a straight face. The Raikage stared long and hard into Naruto's eyes, unaffected by their oddness. Deciding he was telling the truth and his journey was bold, he set Naruto down. "Take my brother with you?" he asked of Naruto. Naruto was silent for quite a bit. "Huh?" he asked intelligently. Yugito finally broke down and laughed her pretty little ass off, rolling on the ground at the series of events that unfolded before her. Despite only knowing him for half an hour, Naruto's mannerisms seemed quite odd and hilarious from his initial persona. Both Cage and demonized teen stared at Yugito as she laughed on the ground. Looking to each other, they nodded to Naruto, the dark child nodding back and going down on his knees. He suddenly seized Yugito's shoulders, the once blonde still laughing up a storm, and seized her lips in another passionate kiss. The effects were immediate, as she moaned into the kiss and clung to him, immediately quieting down. They would have continued their little makeout session if it didn't interrupt them with a rather loud cough. "Do you mind? We're busy." Naruto deadpanned to A, earning himself another bump on the head. "So seriously, huh?" Naruto returned to his confused visage. "Take my brother with you, Gaki. He's the Hachibi container, and he doesn't fare well in the village." While half the village praises him for his burden, half again despises him, this half more able to act upon this hatred. "Please, take him with you. I heard everything you told Yugito-chan. I don't care if you wage war with the other 4 nations, just taking care of my daughter and brother." A pleaded of Naruto. Naruto looked to Yugito, who nodded with a smile at the prospect of having her adoptive brother along for the ride that was sure to be fun. "Very well then, I'll bring your brother along." "Where is he?" Naruto asked. "Right here," A answered with a cheeky grin, sidestepping to the left, showing his brother, Kurabi. Kurabi was an odd one. He seemed to be immersed in something he was writing in a small notepad. Naruto noted the bleached hair copying his style, and his goatee of the same hue. On his right shoulder was the kanji of iron, and a tattoo of a bull head on his left, 2 bull horns on his left cheek. His top lip was a darker shade of his skin than the bottom, and he wore ovular sunglasses. He wore the standard Kumo 1-strap flag jacket, with a red rope around his waist, a white scarf around his neck and 7 swords sheathed on his back. He wore the generic arm and shin guards of Kumo in Volt issue pants and sandals. "Hello," Naruto greeted. "Yo," B merely answered. This earned him a bump on the head courtesy of his brother. The man likes to bop people on the head, it seems. Be nice. You'll be going on a journey with this boy." A told his brother. "Why I gotta do that? That's whack." B rhymed horrible, earning a second bump on his head. "Don't start with your infernal rhyming. You're going so he can keep you safe. Now before you start bitching that you can handle yourself, this kid holds the Kyuubi. A started, used to. Naruto corrected. A nodded, used to hold the Kyuubi. And his power that led to that fact can protect you both. I've received word of a group of S-rank criminals collecting the Jinchuriki, and they travel in pairs. Do you think you can take on 2, or possibly more, S-rank missing nin? Asked his brother. Shit, hell yeah I could. Take Hachibi? They wished they would. B rhymed again, punching the air like a boxer. Bump, just shut up and go with them. A deadpanned. Before you agree, you must know my journey is to destroy Konoha. I want to see my old home burned to the very last molecule. No one shall survive, save for those who were smart and defected to my allegiance. All others shall die. Naruto intoned. B was suddenly serious, knowing full well how an antagonistic village could drive one to resentment. Okay, I'll go, he said simply. But can I get some of that sweet power like Lil Miss too? Yo, he tried to rhyme again, his pathetic attempt failing miserably. A vein popped on Naruto's forehead. Only if you promise to limit the rapping. He said stiffly. You have my word, ya heard? He said. Bump. Naruto sighed as he massaged the bridge of his nose. Fine fine. Prepare for some mild pain. He warned, then thrust his hand into B's chest, again like it was water. Corrupting his heart, he stepped back to view the minor transformation. It didn't change much. The only noticeable change was the faint yellow glow under his sunglasses and his hair turning black. Strangely, he didn't develop the facial symbol Naruto and Yugito wore. Odd. Come along. And Sama, thank you for your consent. I promise you the land of Konoha once I burn it to the ground. Naruto offered as he walked around with his 2 cohorts. Chuckled nervously, disbelieving he just sent his brother and adoptive daughter on a mission with a complete stranger to destroy Konoha, and perhaps the rest of the elemental nations. He waved to the group. The Onikage has returned, and Konoha will burn. Let's begin. The newly reborn Naruto was currently walking down the dirt path with his subordinates and comrades, Ni Yugito and Kurabi, in tow. Explaining his actual reason for wanting to destroy Konoha, i.e. his childhood as a whole, Naruto vowed he would destroy his old home until not a single person was left alive, save for any who developed a brain and defected to his cause. Until then, he would train in his powers, especially his darkness manipulation. Speaking of which, he found he couldn't use any other element. No Kaden, Fuuten, Raiden, Suiten, or Doden. But training in his special elemental manipulation, which he decided to call Kageten for shadow release, he found he could manipulate the shadows into any shape, including a false form of the 5 affinities, including most of the sub-elements. Darkness is universal, in location and shape, so he could manipulate it to spread like fire, blow like wind, quake like earth, flood like water, or strike like lightning. He also currently achieved a false version of wood release, ice, storm, lava, boil, steel, scorch, explosion, and dust. He didn't know how it could imitate the others, like swift release, magnet, yin, yang, or yin-yang, and blaze release is essentially the same as his false fire release. Thinking of the versatility of his darkness made Naruto's mouth water. He could fluidly weave from one element to another. He also found out he had 2 other elements at his disposal. Dark release, allowing him advanced chakra manipulation in its raw form, though he had no idea why it was called Maiden when it had no relation to the darkness, and void release, the control over the maddening abyss his converted chakra seemed to derive power from. It gave a sort of gravity manipulation and access to spacetime ninjutsu, due to its ability to ripple the air around him and his target and encase them in a pocket dimension. He began training in his chakras stolen from the Kyuubi, with much help from Yugito and Kurabi, both of which had perfect control over their biju. After only short amount of time, he could control about 6 tails, surprising the Jinchuriki with his quick advancement in biju chakra control, surpassing them in their expectations. It was expected since it was a part of him, as opposed to borrowing it from his biju like they did. He also began kenjutsu training with the sword that appeared with his rebirth, an obsidian blade with a silver edge and a faint golden glow, naming it Wailing Dark. Channeling chakra in the blade allowed him to extend it for miles. He also found he developed a love of fighting, and thus limited himself to prolong his opponent's existence and his own entertainment. He would only use his sword if the enemy was worthy. He decided they were to head to Sanagakure, as his network of shades informed him of the hated and feared Ichibi Jinchuriki, Sabaku no Gaara, just a 4-year-old child like he was. His shades were everywhere in Suna after they decided the child's existence was interesting enough to garner the attention of their master, and they observed his whole story. He was injected with the biju in the womb, so he had a tie with the demon since birth, but the actual seal was unstable, resulting in insomnia and violent tendencies, but only towards those who attacked him, which was a disgusting amount within the village. His birth killed his mother, who gave him his name as a curse on Suna, and he was currently in the care of her brother, one Yashimaru. His father, the Case-Cage, intended him to be a weapon, but upon finding he was weak-willed and lashed out, all but disowned him as his child. Such delicious suffering. With a rise from the shadows, Naruto and his entourage appeared in front of the gates to Suna, surprising the guards, who quickly asked for their identification, only to be silenced by tendrils bursting from the small of Kurabi's back, echoing his status as the Jinchuriki of the Hachibi no Ushi Oni, and impaling their hearts, corrupting them and turning them into his specific type of shade, similar to Naruto's, but their lower bodies were a mass of tendrils, their arms thickened as a stump grew from their elbows, and 4 bullhorns grew from their heads, and these new bullshades retracted into the shadows of their masters. They sauntered into the village, the Junin and Chunin only giving them a passing glance, since them being in the village meant the guards let them in and they weren't immediate enemies of Suna. It also helped when, with a single glance to Naruto's eyes, they were subtly hypnotized to disregard their appearance as travelers. They made their way to the Case-Cage's mansion, where Gaara and his 2 siblings lived. All the guards were converted into shades and everyone else was asleep. Well, everyone but Gaara, due to his insomnia. So there would be a minimum amount of obstacles. Appearing from a shadow in the child's room, Naruto opted to achieve this endeavor alone, having Yugito and Kurabi taking refuge in a nearby hotel. Sabaku no Gaara, Naruto called out, causing the boy to jump in shock and spin around. Who are you? He asked fearfully, afraid this was another assassination attempt by his father for his failure as a weapon of the village. I am Uzumaki Naruto, reborn and reincarnated with the blood of the Onikage. The blonde-turned dark-haired Hanyu answered. I have come to offer you a proposition. He added. What? Gaara asked, narrowing his eyes in confusion as Shukaku's mad ramblings died down at the mention of this, Onikage. I extend my hand in a show of brotherhood. I, like you, was once a Jinchuriki. I was also despised by my villagers. But upon my death, I was reborn and given the power to strike back. Now, I will make them pay. I will accomplish this by gathering my brethren, so I have come for you. I know your story, Gaara. Shukaku injected into you before birth, your mother dying in the act, your father attempting to mold you into a weapon, only to attempt to cover his failure with assassination attempts on your life. Take my hand, and I can take you away from this nightmare. I can give you the power to keep anyone from hurting you, and to make these people pay, especially your father. Naruto offered his left hand. For the longest time, Gaara stared at his hand and thought over his offer. He did hate this village and his father, but he wasn't strong enough to protect himself forever, even with Shukaku's sand. He was so afraid, so alone. This man offered him a salvation from all of it, from all the pain. He slowly and shakily extended his hand and grasped Naruto's firmly, soon smiling at him. Naruto smiled in return. Excellent. Now, I apologize in advance, this may sting. Thrusting his right hand forward, he converted Gaara's heart into a seed of darkness, the redhead's body engulfed in darkness, as his change would be more drastic than Yugito's and Kurabi's, as their bodies were already fully grown. He stepped back from the cocoon of shadow as it fell, the new Gaara taking its place. His red, messy hair now turned black as the night, his seafoam green eyes now yellow. Gaara was now only 4 inches shorter than Naruto, now evolved to an adult-like state much like him. He was dressed in a black muscle shirt under a dark purple, short-sleeved cloak that reached his knees, a blood-red sash across his chest in a Y shape, as it strapped a large gourd to his back, the container for what would be his special brand of darkness manipulation. He had shinobi mesh connected to the ends of his muscle shirt sleeves to his mid-forearms, black Embu-style pants tucked into matching boots. Due to his transformation being similar to Naruto's, the insane Ichibi within him was eradicated, its chakra infused with Gaara's being. Looking at his now larger hands, Gaara was silent in shock, both at his new body and the silence of Shukaku. The voice, it's gone, he whispered. He then looked up at Naruto. Thank you. Let us be on our way before my father and siblings awaken. He will die soon enough, as will these idiotic villages. Nodding, Naruto put his hand on Gaara's shoulder and they both broke apart into squares, taking to the skies and flying across Suna. Reforming in the hotel room they accommodated alongside his new ally, Naruto greeted those who awaited him. Gaara is with us. Do what you will if you desire to convert some of the dust into more of our legion. We leave as soon as we can. Naruto intoned, receiving nods from the two Kumo shinobi. Yugito and B had already sent their own soldiers to assimilate Suna's version of Anbu, increasing their numbers and adding to their collective army. The four people within the room nodded, exiting the building in their own methods, Naruto's Teizagerdoki no Heni, Twilight displacement, taking Gaara with him until he learned how to transport himself on his own, and Yugito and B's Black Lightning. Appearing outside of Suna's walls, the four shinobi traveled through the frigid desert, unaffected by the night cold due to their constitutions and dark enhancements. As they traveled, Naruto announced their next course of action. We are heading to Kiri. My shades have informed me that the Mizukage is the Sanbi Jinchuriki, but he appears hypnotized, and Kirigakure is in the middle of a civil war, so entering will not be easy. Be prepared to fight. Receiving nods, the four dark shinobi increased the chakra channeled to their legs to increase their speed through the desert. Knowing they would need to recross the border to Hai no Kuni and travel across the southern edge to the eastern coast to catch a boat, as was the only method of arriving to Kiri. 3 hours later, about midway across Hai no Kuni, they were felled upon by a group of Konoha Anbu. None of them those Naruto labeled, the Understanding, though none of them held any ill will towards him. Merely indifference, but after his proclamation in Konoha, they were enemies. Uzumaki Naruto, we are here to return you to Konoha. Hokage-sama believes you were emotionally distraught when you made your announcement, and will give you reprieve from the consequences if you return with us. The Anbu captain informed him, flanked by 7 of his comrades. I was perfectly lucid when I announced my intent. I endeavored to burn Konoha to the ground, save for those who would join me. I have no intention to return at this moment. I must decline. Naruto answered flatly. Then we must take you by force. I apologize in advance. The captain responded, withdrawing his tanto. As do I. Naruto returned, flexing his hands as the shadows danced around him. 2-on-1 would usually be inadvisable for a shinobi to accept, but these weren't ordinary shinobi. A thought that echoed within the thoughts of each Anbu as 2 broke off against 1 Jinchuriki each. I know you are aware of the state I left your comrade in Konoha, and that you know I can easily splatter your bodies across the grass. Naruto started, staring at his 2 opponents impassively as they readied themselves, slightly shaken at the memory of their eviscerated comrade when Naruto left. With Gaara, this being his first fight in his new body, Gaara was slightly hesitant to face Anbu, but the shadows around him eased his worries, and he steeled his resolve. Falling into the instincts that pervaded his mind, as they were all he could rely on at the moment, he crossed his arms across his chest. The obsidian gourd on his back, which was thankfully lightweight due to its constitution, broke down into the black sand that formed it, absorbing the ambient shadows to increase its quantity and shot forward in a torrent, burying the first Anbu it hit and wrapping him up in a cocoon of darkness and raising him to the night sky. Gaara controlled it with his raised hand, soon clenching it violently. Karaku Susu, darkness binding funeral. Following his will, the coffin of black dust imploded, splattering the Anbu's corpse within, only a few drops falling from the floating mass, as any remains were soon ground and converted into the same dark sand that was its tomb. The remaining Anbu facing Gaara was shocked at the quick death of his comrade but soon shook it off and strung his hands together in a collection of seals. Kaden. Gukaku no Jutsu. Spitting a massive fireball through the mask, somehow, the Anbu soon followed up by discreetly conjuring a clone and switched places with it, using his stealth skills to circle Gaara's position for a pincer strike, knowing that dark sand would come to his protection. The black dust indeed provided a shield for Gaara, but due to his rookie control over it, As this was his first fight, it didn't come fast enough to block the Anbu, but it was fast enough for something else, as Gaara's physical body was reacted for him, raising an arm up as if it could block the impending Tanto. In a flurry of darkness, Gaara's arm was left intact, as an ornate gauntlet formed on his arm, blocking the blade, and his equally armored opposing hand came forth with a palm strike to the Anbu's chest, pushing him back. Glaring at the Anbu at first, Gaara then turned his attention to his new accessories, marveling at the versatility of the shadows. On his arms from the elbows down were a set of gauntlets with a large pair of plates on the tops of the forearms, segmented armor under them, as the plates were trimmed with crimson tribal markings centered around the same sign as what appeared on Naruto's and Yugito's faces. The armor started close to his skin at the elbows but went outward as it progressed down his arms, ending about an inch from his wrists, as his hands were garbed in thick armored gloves continuing the tribal patterns, the segmented armor of his fingers tipped with crimson blades. These gauntlets, understandably, due to his previous status, mirrored the limbs of the Ichibi no Tanuki. They also were the main conduits for improving Gaara's control over the sand until he trained in that himself. They also worked as conventional melee weapons, spikes popping out of the knuckles for a second, then retracting, 3 blades popping out the sides of the forearms and doing the same. Momentarily surprised by the gauntlets, both combatants soon shook it off and continued their fight. Gaara charged the Anbu and engaged him in taijutsu, the shinobi of Konoha blocking the blades of his gauntlets with his tanto when needed, deftly dodging the waves of dark sand that followed Gaara's movements. With a somewhat oafish swipe of his arm, a wave of sand followed Gaara's claws, soon followed up by a swipe with the other hand, then he spun in place, his claws conjuring a ring of sand around him as the Anbu blocked his claws again, dodging the sand, but he thrust both hands forward when he faced the Anbu again, several spiked tendrils sprouting from the ring and intent on splattering the Anbu's body across the foliage. When he dodged, the spikes retracted and the ring split in half, both parts morphing into large copies of Gaara's gauntlets, the right shooting forward with his palm thrust of the same hand, missing the Anbu again as he dodged, twice so when he followed with a stretch of the other large claw, but he finally caught the Anbu when both echoes shot forward and spun around each other, creating a tornado of claws that sheared the Anbu's chest armor and threw him into a tree behind him. Slamming his hands on the ground, Gaara sent another wave of sand to engulf the Anbu, binding him to the tree, and conjured a small legion of shukaku-like limbs, flying around him like a swarm of gnats until they melded together into a sphere of black sand, soon collapsing in on itself and killing the shinobi. Standing up straight and panting lightly, Gaara dispelled his gauntlets and remade his gourd, returning to the path, waiting for his fellow Jinchuriki to finish their fights, idly musing about what else he could create with his sand. With Naruto, but I won't do that to you. I wish to prolong this fight. I wish to test myself. I wish to play with you. Naruto continued, smirking as their shaking increased slightly, but their resolve was unwavering. With Yugito, Miss Ni was currently engaging her duo of Anbu in Kenjutsu, using her Kage no Sume, shadow claws, to combat their Tanto, hissing when one of them channeled wind chakra through their blade to easily cut through her claws. Snarling at them, much like a cat, black lightning started to crackle around her hands. Surprising her opponents, her entire arms actually turned into black lightning as she thrust them forward, 2 large blasts of electricity heading for them. Raiden. Suin Kuroi Kaminari Teiho. Lightning release. Twin black lightning cannons. Barely dodging the massive lasers, the Anbu rolled out of the way and returned fire with a fusion of Gukaku and Renkuden, the already large fireball growing exponentially in size and ferocity as it closed in on Yugito, who hissed as the strong light numbed her body slightly and she reverted her arms and clapped her hands together. Raiden. Raijinheki. Lightning release. Lightning encampment wall. The ground burst with the shield of lightning forming in front of her, a large explosion resulting from the 3 elements meeting. All was silent for a moment as the Anbu waiting for any sign that Yugito survived. From the dust cloud came their opponent, her arms from the elbows down turned into obsidian blades, a circle of spikes marking the transition between flesh and darkness, as she fell upon them with a roar. Immediately catching the first Anbu off guard, she sliced off his arms, letting him squirm, bleed, and scream for a bit, then bisected him at the waist, time seeming to slow down as his limbless torso spun in the air from the force of her strike, as she brought down her other arm and split his remains down the middle, blood flying everywhere. The force of her strike embedded her bladed limb in the ground, and the ANBU's blood soaked into her dark weapons. Pulling her arm free, but keeping the blade stuck, she morphed her limb into a sword held by her normal hand, which she retrieved from the ground and brandished towards the remaining Anbu. The blade of her opposing arm widening to an axe and sliding off for her human hand to wield a large hand axe. With a lunge, Yugito almost flew across the ground as she attempted to impale the ANBU's head, but her opponent blocked the blade with his tanto and pushed her off, spitting a quick teppodama to ward her off, but she temporarily grew her axe to insane dimensions and split the technique in half, shrinking the weapon to normal size and raising her sword-wielding hand to the sky, slowly rotating it at the shoulder in front of her, darkness creating clone limbs and weapons, as she now had a forest of arms from her left shoulder, resting the shadow axe on her right. Okoreru Kami no Kage, shadow of an angry god, she intoned flatly, before she shot forward by kicking off a vertical platform of shadows. A storm of blades greeting the Anbu as she thrust all her blades repeatedly. Very quickly, the ANBU's guard was broken, and large, deep cuts were strewn across his body, rendering his body armor useless, and soon relieving him of his weapon, his limbs, and eventually his life. With a cry of effort, Yugito brought her axe around and decapitated the Anbu. As his body fell, she dispelled her limbs and weapons of shadow, leaving the area and joining Gaara on the path they were taking to Hai no Kuni's east coast. With Naruto, I will not sully my hands with your blood. My new pet shall be the harbinger of your end. Naruto intoned as his form turned pitch black, an ominous silhouette before the Konoha Anbu as the darkness seemed to come to life and step away from him, towards them, and taking a new shape. Its figure thinned slightly, but what could be made out as the original's clothing shifted around as colors other than black slowly faded into existence. With gray, dead flesh garbed in an open, black robe with sharp shoulders and no sleeves, the creature's chest was bare for all to see, as its ribcage was torn open, revealing a pulsing mass of pure darkness, like a heart. Above the torso was its throat bound in a metal brace, a broken chain hanging off the loop to its right, but a complete chain to its left connecting it and the metal brace on its left wrist, over black bandages worn on both forearms. Its terrifying visage was stuck in a maddening grin, its blank sockets staring at nothing, but the Anbu could swear it was looking at them, the kanji for Onikage emblazoned on its forehead, a light with a violet flame. Though decayed and rotting, its arms showed defined muscles, its fingers ending in jagged claws, the left hand grasping its weapon of choice. The wooden pommel of a scythe, a sharp curve in the decaying bark ending in the heel of its obsidian weapon. A lantern-like attachment glowing with a dead light, the blade shaped more like a handheld sickle than a traditional scythe, straight, then breaking into a curve. The silver belt of its robe started on the bottom of its sides, then curved down to a point just below its waist. Its robe flowing in front of its armored legs, the slightest hint of its silver-cuffed boots visible to the Anbu. Now rise, Naruto ordered. The standing corpse suddenly sprung to life, taking in a rasping air as its chest rose slightly and the empty blackness of its eyes glowed with white orbs, soon staring at the Anbu in sick glee. Its joints creaked as it began to move, gripping its weapon in both hands and taking a stance as if to lunge at them. And fall. Naruto ordered the Anbu, his creature springing into action. With Kurabi, B was currently playing with his opponents, though not on purpose, as he was writing in his notepad various raps for the future as he dodged their swipes and jutsu with ease. Of the group, he was the most experienced in the life of a shinobi, and as a Jinchuriki. When one of their tantos sliced off a corner of the page he was on, he suddenly stopped and scowled. Closing his notepad and pocketing it, he coated his pencil with lightning chakra and threw it lazily, but it shot through the air like a bullet, piercing the Anbu at fault in the brain, killing him instantly. B was usually laid back when it came to most things, but he became very serious when someone interfered with his hobby. The only one who could interrupt him was Naruto, as he was strong enough to warrant interruption. Everyone else would be met with extreme retaliation. And these Anbu broke his groove. He suddenly exploded with Biju chakra, 3 tails writhing behind him as a pair of horns formed from the foul chakra. Thrusting his arm forward, he morphed his tails into more arms, sending a wave of tailed beast chakra arms towards the remaining Anbu, causing him to jump high to avoid them, leaving himself open for a follow-up which B didn't let slide. Hedo Bato. Utilizing the horns of his chakra cloak, B didn't actually go for a headbutt. Rather, he used them to relieve the Anbu of his right arm, turning around above him and coating his left arm with lightning chakra, holding it to the side and flexing his muscles. Rariato. Shooting downwards with a burst of chakra, B caught the Anbu by the back of his neck within his elbow, the force quickly tearing his cranium off, as B landed with a crash, dispelling his cloak. B didn't train all that much in his new shadow techniques, unlike Yugito and Naruto, so he opted for what he knew. If he ever got the energy to bother with it, he would train in them in the future. Yugito would probably have to bash him on the head to motivate him, though. With a shunshin, he appeared with Yugito and Gaara, already writing in his little notepad again, causing Yugito to sweat drop. With Naruto, Naruto's creature surprised the Anbu with its speed as it liberated one of them of his right arm. As the trailing light of the lantern on its blade passed over the stump, the Anbu's illuminated flesh began to decay and rot, yet the limb regrew, only to horrible mutate after it finished regenerating. At first, the gray limb merely had varicose veins, but the prominent ones on the top of the hand leading to the knuckles began to throb and grow, the skin bursting open along the middle and ring fingers as a black substance bled from them, fusing the fingers into a wicked claw, smaller ones breaking the skin of the remaining fingertips. A black tendril burst from the bottom of the wrist, and the ulna tore itself out of the side of the arm, reforming into a wicked blade as the ripped flesh of the forearm knitted itself back together and hardened, creating faux scales that flared out and became several small blades down the arm. About to mock Naruto for outfitting his opponent with his own power, the Anbu victim yelled in shock and horror as the arm seemed to have a mind of its own and direct him to attack his comrade. "Kuma, what are you doing?" The snake-masked Anbu yelled indignantly as he deftly dodged his seemingly mad comrade. It's not me. This thing has a mind of its own," Kuma defended, not noticing the gray sickness crawling up his arm and morphing the flesh along the way. Only when it reached past his shoulder did he realize and began to panic even more, resorting to stabbing his possessed limb, but that only agitated the virus-like substance, and he still felt pain. "Fuck it, cut it off. Cut it off," Kuma pleaded of his comrade as the infection began to creep near his throat. With no hesitation, as any second wasted was another second the disease-like substance had to plague his comrade, Hubby channeled wind and fire chakra through his tanto, a skill he had mastered over 3 years of intensive training, and swung, slicing the possessed limb off his comrade, mentally wincing at his agony-filled screams, even as the wound was cauterized, to prevent him from bleeding out. Grasping at the surgically precise stump that was once his shoulder, Kuma grit his teeth and panted heavily to toughen through the pain. Just as he started to calm down, uncaring that Naruto and his creature stood to the side, purposely leaving them be, as if waiting for something, another wave of pain shot from where his burn was, as bone and muscle burst out of his shoulder, reforming into an arm, but radically different from the mutated limb from before. The arm consisted of 3 main gray masses connected by thick, black tendrils. The mass at the shoulder bore a right-side-up triangle, though the bottom right point proved to be the tip, as 5 lines were behind the left edge, reaching back to hide between the spout-like growths sweeping behind the mass, minuscule embers of chakra floating at the end of the openings. The second mass floated where the forearm would be, a large tomo shape with a heart-like symbol, only horribly mutated and altered to suit the flesh, the entire mass pulsing to a heartbeat. The last mass, the hand, was comprised of a disc shape with 4 claws sprouting from it, the black veins leading to the ebony tips. The weight of the mass appeared to be substantial, as the plagued Anbu nearly fell to his knees, the transformed limb touching the ground. What is this?" The Anbu yelled at Naruto, unable to move at all. Just when he got the feeling back in his legs, his arm came to life again, swinging at his partner, but there was no escape for the man this time, due to its size and surprising speed. A good chunk of the left side of his upper torso was hacked off, including his entire arm. That chunk included his heart, and he died almost instantly, yet just as immediately, this sickness struck, regenerating a mirror image of his comrade's arm. but a new mutation took hold around his shoulder blade. A chunk of the flesh of the specific area stretched out on the same tendrils that created the skeleton of its arm. Various spikes growing from the side of it to imitate a wing. A hook blade of the same ringed bone-like material forming where a thumb would be. Hubby? The still living, though distraught and mutated, Kuma Anbu exclaimed in alarm. His comrade merely groaned and turned to him before returning the favor, carving his flesh from stomach to forehead, splattering viscera everywhere. Naruto and his dark creature watching, unfeeling, as he mutated further. Only the Anbu's face regenerated, as the sickness used the new trench down his body to its advantage. The gray flesh and beady red eyes above an upper jaw filled with massive fangs too large for any human mouth. The teeth continuing along the rim of the gash through its body, creating a gaping maw. As it drooled acid, its stomach turned into a factory constantly pumping it out. Its individual ribs bursting out its sides and turned into spider-like appendages, the new beast hissing and twitching. Naruto, amused yet bored, willed his creature to do away with its new spawn for now. Tapping its scythe on the ground, the light of the lantern in the heel of its blade shined on the mutated Anbu, turning them into a black mist that flew into the core. After such, the creature flattened into its own shadow and fused to Naruto's. Pleased with his work, Naruto turned and walked back to his comrades, his smirk widening with mirth when they appeared to be impatiently awaiting his arrival, very bored. Did everyone enjoy themselves? He asked, his amusement at their annoyance and the annihilation of their opponents evident in his voice. Can we move along before we are sidetracked again? Gaara asked emotionlessly, but Naruto could detect the underlying annoyance at their detour. Nodding with a smirk, Naruto led the way to the east coast for the next 2 hours, and they caught a boat to Kiri, hypnotizing the captain to give them a free ride and not ask questions. As they lazed about, Naruto brought up the topic of their darkness powers he sensed while they fought. As the progenitor to their ascensions, he could sense all forms and moments of manipulation of the shadows, and he was quite pleased with Yugito's and Gaara's, but then he turned to Kurabi. B-san, I understand you didn't access your shadow powers. Care to explain? Naruto said. He wasn't angry at the Jinchuriki for this, merely curious. Kurabi looked up from his notepad. I didn't train in them before, so I don't have much more. Gyuki is wary of these powers, so I stuck with the usual to crush those fools like flowers. B offered, smirking in triumph at his rhyming, even as tick marks appeared on everyone else's head. Naruto turned to Yugito for translation. After stopping her choking motions towards the eccentric Jinchuriki, she turned back to him. He says Hachibi is a bit afraid of the darkness powers cause they belong to the Onikage. Most demons, especially the Biju, have an instinctual fear of the Onikage and its powers, so it makes sense that Gyuki-san would be hesitant to let his container use them. She explained. Nodding, Naruto turned back to B. Tell Gyuki-san that I am no threat to him or you, B-san. As long as you are on my side, I will not harm you and, in fact, will protect you. If you wish, I can help you train. Naruto offered. Smirking, Kurabi responded. Sure thing, Mr. 9, that'd be damn fine. He held his fist out. Looking at it, Naruto raised an eyebrow until he experimentally brought his fist forward and bumped it with B's. When the Hachibi container smirked, he let himself smile slightly, though it was hidden under his collar. Even after his transformation into the man he was now, deep down, Naruto was still the same kid from before, and he yearned friends, not soldiers. 2 hours later, after docking in Kiri's harbor, Naruto and his entourage sauntered into the village, the same song and dance that let them walk right through Suna, allowing them passage to the Mizukage's office. It was almost unnecessary due to the small amount of shinobi in the village at the moment. Apparently they came at an inopportune time, as a majority of the shinobi were out in bloodline eradication squads. It made things much easier, thankfully, but of course the Mizukage tower was still guarded by a pair of Kiri Anbu. Bearing a lion mask and a hawk mask were 2 Anbu flanking the doors to the tower, Lion having white hair with 2 bangs flanking his face under the mask. Through the eye holes, Naruto could see the red bags under his eyes, a Kagaya. Hawk had auburn hair with crossing spikes down the back of his head. He didn't know why, but Naruto had a feeling that Hawk also had a Kekkei Genkei. Odd, seeing as Yagura, the Mizukage, lead the campaign against clans with Kekkei Genkei. Perhaps a moment of fight fire with fire, brainwashing these members, and possibly others, into killing their own family. Such delectable evil. Stopping in front of the double doors, Naruto turned to his followers and addressed them. I will speak to Yugura alone. Yugito, Gaara, take care of these Anbu. B-san, work on the darkness exercises I told you about on the way here. Naruto ordered, turning into darkness and flattening into his own shadow, crawling under the doors before the guards could stop him. The Jinchuriki trio nodded and grabbed the Anbu by their collars and transported them outside of the village to a suitable field for the ensuing battle. Kurabi taking to the sidelines to work on the exercises Naruto spoke of. To aid him, Naruto injected an echo of his being into B's mindscape, sharing the same space as the Hachibi, as it verbally guided B in the steps. Yugito and Gaara engaging the Anbu in combat. What do you freaks want with Mizukage-sama? The Kagaya asked, spikes of bone growing out of his arms as Yugito fought him off with her claws of shadow. We're just here for a proposition. Him surviving all depends on his answered. Yugito answered, smirking as the Anbu grit his teeth in anger. Gaara was currently repeatedly dodging waves of lava and corrosive mist being lobbed at him by his opponent. A Terumi, joy. Well, time to try something. Pushing his wool into his shadow, Gaara concentrated as the Shukaku shade formed from his rebirth arose from the darkness around him, creating a black, wide humanoid form behind Gaara. The waist up only, floating behind him like a phantom, its head slouched forward and bearing the tanuki ears, red beady eyes, and a red jagged grin, its arms longer than a human's and clawed like Gaara's gauntlets. Its body was riddled with cracks in its form as if it were broken, red light seeping through them. Gaara's gauntlets reformed, as well as a metal copy of the Ichibi's tail attached to the back of his waist. His opponent, momentarily shocked at the Ichibi-like ghost behind the invader, snapped out of his stupor and spat various lava globules at the raven-headed child, only to be met with the phantasm bursting into a black, sand-like material and form a barrier in front of Gaara, the lava sliding off it harmlessly. Two red orbs and a zigzag began to form on it, two ear-like extensions growing from it. Soon the circular shield became the Ichibi's face, bursting forward with a roar, attempting to swallow him whole. Yotan. Sekaigyo no Jutsu. Sweden. Teppodama. A quick succession of techniques met the dark maw, a mass of quicklime meeting it halfway, the water hitting afterwards and quickly activating the necessary reaction to harden the substance, stopping the manifested darkness in its tracks. It fell to the ground in a pile of quick-dried cement, various cracks forming and allowing the darkness to escape, the attack diffused. In the storm of the shadows flurrying back to Gaara, the child of the case cage burst forward, its clawed gauntlet raised for the Kiri Anbu's masked face. The Terumi unsheathed his tanto and blocked the claws, surprisingly pushed back by the youth's strength. Before he could retaliate, Gaara struck first, his tail coming forward and shearing the Anbu's side, causing him to yell out and throw Gaara off in shock and pain. Holding his side in an attempt to stem the bleeding, the Terumi Anbu found a good chunk of his side was torn out. Kageten. Goka Meshitsu. Shadow release. Great fire destruction. A massive, black fireball took out the entire back of the Mizukage tower, drawing the attention of all the fighters. They spied a large mass of bubbling, crimson chakra jumping from the inferno, those in the know recognizing it as the Mizukage in his version 1 Biju cloak. Naruto's compatriots recognized the technique as one of his shadow fire release jutsu. I'm disappointed that you refused, Yugura-san. You could have been part of something greater. No matter, I shall strike you down here and be on my way. Naruto announced, choosing to take the Mizukage's life on a whim since he refused his offer to join his group. Everyone spied Naruto jumping from the hole in the building, his lower legs turning into a black smoke that allowed him to float above the village, then hold his hands out. I can sense you holding back, Yugura-san. Perhaps it is your desire to not strike down your own villagers in the crossfire? If so, then allow me to fix that issue. Boden. Shinra Tensai. Void release. Heavenly subjugation of the omnipresent god. A massive sphere of pressure burst from Naruto, flattening the third of Kirigakure he was over, just to weed out Yugura, who dodged just at the last second, but retaliated violently at the senseless murder of innocents, shooting several pressurized jets of water, strong enough to cut steel, and easily hacking off large chunks of Naruto's body, taking his right arm at the shoulder, his left at the elbow, and his legs at the thigh and shin. Naruto just smirked as his limbs fell to the crater below, turning to black smoke halfway down before disappearing, his stumps smoking at the ends and regenerating his limbs. Flexing his fingers, Naruto spoke again. If you want to make this a battle of Biju Chakra, allow me to oblige. Channeling his own Biju Chakra, Naruto was engulfed in a three-tailed cloak of bubbling obsidian chakra. Clapping his hands together, a black halo formed around his wrists and numerous laser-like black tendrils shot from his hands. Kageton. Reiza Sakasu. Shadow release. Encouraging crushing chain tormenting principle. No joke, that's the canon translation. Thrusting his hand forward, Yugura created a large, multi-layer water mirror. A copy of Naruto's attack forming for Yugura, as he forced his cloak to ascend to the second state, engulfing himself in a black sphere before arising. Now cloaked in blood-red chakra, Yugura's body was noticeably thicker, with a shell-like growth on his back, complete with spikes on it and his head, thick arms and claw digits, and three shrimp-like tails swaying behind him, glowing eyes glaring at Naruto as his equally luminescent mouth opened in a roar, sending a shockwave towards the dark-haired youth. Grunting at the force, but smirking almost insanely, Naruto shot down to the ground, then across the land towards Yugura so quickly, he was nearly invisible to those not trained in those speeds. Yugura just barely able to dodge him when Naruto attempted an uppercut, a palm thrust to his side throwing the Onikage away, a large chunk of coral forming on the point of impact and weighing Naruto down. Shattering it with a jab of his elbow, Naruto got to his feet and clapped his hands together, close to his bother this time, causing several dog-headed pillars to rise around him. Kageton. Shishi Inu Hedo. Shadow release. Fu Doghead. Thrusting one hand forward, Naruto had his construct stretched towards Yugura in an attempt to bite him and hold him down, before lunging forward himself. Deftly dodging the dog heads attempting to take a chunk of flesh out of his body, Yugura slashed them to pieces, destabilizing their dark forms, completely unprepared when Naruto appeared right in his face and grabbed it while kneeing him in the stomach. Yugura felt a tingling sensation where Naruto's hands were, and a drop in his chakra reserves, as well as his cloak being drained. He glared up at Naruto, who smirked in return. "Hey, gotta love Maiden, Kayaketsuko." Naruto commented, the cloak bleeding away from Yugura's face as Naruto drained his Biju chakra. Eventually, he was kicked off, the cloak returning to Yugura's face, but a noticeable slump in his posture revealed the damage done. "Thanks for the chakra, Yugura-san. With it I can do this." Naruto commented, the marking on his face, almost blindingly bright as the chakra around Naruto's arms thickened to the point of hiding them, before he slammed his fists together, dispelling the cloud and revealing what he did. Inipo. Onikage no Wan. Demon art. Arms of the demon shadow. He remarked simply, revealing one of the few techniques allowed to him as the new Onikage. His arms were about twice as thick as before, made of some type of organic armor, black intersecting plates flanking an ash-gray strip down the center, which ended in what appeared to be an eye on the top of the hand, glowing crimson and emitting a bit of energy with its movements. The underside of his forearms a midnight purple that stretched onto the palms, ducking into the armor on his fingers that ended in claws. With these arms, the first Onikage struck down and took in the souls of those who would go against his reign, forging them into weapons. With these arms, the first Onikage drew blood from the Jubi and tore chunks from its flesh. With these arms, the second Onikage will destroy you. Naruto lectured, the crimson slits of his eyes glowing just as intensely as the eyes on his new arms. Before Yugura could even roar a challenge, Naruto was already upon him. A double-fisted punch to his sternum blowing a hole clear through his body. The delayed blast of wind from the sheer speed of his movement and strength of the attack soon blowing him away, even as his chakra began to heal him much slower than normal. Appearing above the wounded Jinchuriki, arm raised with a ring of scale-like spikes around his wrist opened and a crimson, demonic energy pouring from them. Naruto slammed his fist into the vulnerable stomach of his opponent, creating a miniature crater within the massive one they were already in, before two more shockwaves of equal strength pushed Yugura deeper into the ground. When the dust settled, Naruto, in his version 1 cloak, was still standing over Yagura in his version 2, glaring down at him. "Get up," he ordered. "No, more," Yagura rasped out, his body shaking from the pain. "Get up," Naruto yelled, slamming his foot on the transformed Mizukage's stomach, exacerbating his injuries. Yagura didn't even say anything this time, he was in so much pain. "Very well. Then I'll make you get up," he commented, removing his foot and forming his right hand into a knife position, 3 claw-like pods near his elbow extending on small arms. Dark gray bone-like spikes in their tips lengthening to about tanto size. Garbed in unstable crimson chakra, before Naruto threw them with a swipe of his arm, stabbing into Yagura's chest and shoulders, disappearing in a burst of speed not a millisecond after, just in time to witness the massive explosion that went off with Yagura at the center. RORRRGGGGHHHH. "There we go tilde," Naruto commented with a smirk, watching as the already sizable cloud of smoke was dwarfed by another from within, followed by a shockwave of chakra. The shockwave blew away all covers, revealing the Sanbi in all its glory. Knocking his knuckles together, Naruto had a feral grin. "Time to make some turtle soup," he yelled, drawing the Sanbi no Kyodaigame's rage, a massive water bullet flying towards Naruto. "Oh no you don't." Rearing his fist back, Naruto punched the building-sized water bullet, dispelling it easily, only for a green-gray armored tail to be revealed, swinging towards him. "Oh she!" Naruto felt all the force of a freight train slam into the side of his entire form, sending him flying into another part of the village. The Sanbi quickly utilizing its Choden Koro to be above Naruto, its curled-up form slamming down onto him, painfully crushing him into the ground, a few buildings crashing around him. "NNGH, cheeky little bitch," Naruto commented as the Sanbi was rolling in place, attempting to shear his flesh off with its numerous spikes and rough shell. With great effort, the Sanbi needed to lose some pounds. Naruto managed to get his palms against the boulder-like enemy, using his elbows as leverage to push up, soon lifting the Biju up, getting to his feet and, with a roar, throwing the monstrous beast across the village. The front half of Naruto's clothes and skin were sheared off, revealing pulped muscles underneath, only for steam to rise from his wounds and begin regenerating, unimpeded by a continuous attack, the shadows fixing his clothes. Can't go jumping around the village with his business hanging out. Looking at his palms, revealing diamond-shaped pods in the very center, Naruto channeled the feeling he got whenever he utilized the abilities of these arms to them, the pods opening to give way to spikes. Thrusting his arms out to the sides, Naruto forced the rest of them out, revealing the spikes to be arrowheads with barbed backwards hooks on ropes of black armor like flesh, needle-like barbs down their entire lengths. Spying the Sanbi rising to its feet, Naruto struck first, stabbing the arrowheads of his whips. They opened up and claws about 3 times the length of their connected rope, stabbed into the ground and, with a tug, pulled out boulders roughly the size of the Biju's head, which Naruto threw right at its face. Having just turned around after flipping off its back, the Sanbi was unprepared for a pair of boulders to slam into its face, breaking a couple of the spikes around it and even some of its teeth. Roaring in pain and rage, the Biju with the given name of Isobu attempted to find Naruto, all the more intent on snuffing his life out, both for attacking him and the threat of returning the Onikage to this earth. There is power in a name, and that name held all the power in existence. The Byu's father, Hagoromo Otsutsuki, the Rikudo Sennin, told them of a powerful demon that aided him when he fought the Jubi. It appeared more like Hagoromo was interfering with their brawl, something the original Onikage was enjoying greatly as it tore chunks out of the Jubi's hide. When he sealed the Jubi within himself, the Onikage was momentarily annoyed at having his opponent taken from him, but then he turned his sights on Hagoromo, leaving only when he grew bored of the Sennin dodging his attacks. Looking through the blood trickling down its face, the Sanbi couldn't find the vessel of the Onikage, confusion flitting across its features, more so when it felt a minuscule tap on its back. Quickly putting 2 and 2 together, the Biju easily realized that presence was Naruto, and attempted to bug him off. Sticking to the shell with chakra channeled to his feet, Naruto thrust his whips forward, increasing their length to wrap around the Sanbi about 3 times, before jumping high up. With supreme effort, Naruto lifted the Sanbi off of the ground, swung it over himself, and slammed it back down, utilizing a burst of void chakra at the last second to triple the force, bringing it down. As such, Isobu coughed a large glob of blood from the force, several of the spikes on its shell ground to nothingness from the force. Its shell as a whole cracked quite a bit. Whilst quick healing, regeneration is the calling card of the Kyuubi, and its Jinchuriki, all Biju, in fact, had a healing factor, just not to the extent of the strongest. At the rate Naruto was wounding Isobu, though, that healing ability was being outdone and rendered inert. And now, Yagura, goodbye. Naruto commented plainly from his position on the Sanbi's stomach. His arms returned to normal as he clapped his hands against its body. Darkness spreading across the Biju's form until it engulfed him, then sinking into its shadow below, Naruto landing in the crater left in its wake. And the rest is silence. He mumbled, standing to his full height, jumping out of the crater afterward. Walking towards the perimeter of the village and his entourage, Naruto concentrated inward as the Sanbi's chakra was added to his own, and its form turned into a shade worthy of its status, joining the Kyuubi formed from his rebirth. Soon, he would bring them out to play, when the opponent is worthy. Very soon. Following the tether tying him to his fellow Jinchuriki, Naruto lowered his hood and pulled down the high collar, revealing his entire face, and happened upon Yugito, Gaara, and Kurabi, alongside two new shades. As well as a woman in some kind of blue dress and a contingency of shinobi that didn't seem like the Mizukage's men. The first shade, formed from the Kagaya, was like a normal shade, but it was clad in armor of bone that was constantly degrading and regenerating, acting as a sort of cage for the central creature cradled within an enlarged rib cage, weapons and bones formed on a whim. Perhaps, Bone Dread? The second, from the Terumi, possibly the clan of this mystery woman leading her contingency, was, again, like a shade, but it was heavily slouched, its arms nearly touching the ground. It appeared to have black lava spouting from its shoulders, forming molten armor down its arms and a bit on its hips from the runoff, its mouth lacking fangs and, instead, bearing slits that exuded steam, much like its eye sockets, and the tube-like appendages on its back, its footsteps burning the ground it walked on, the vein-like pattern across its entire body smoldering with embedded embers. Maybe a burning shadow. They can't all be winners. Who are you? Naruto asked the woman with his arms crossed, spying respect and fear in her eyes, as well as all her shinobi, the meek-looking swordsman wearing headphones looking absolutely terrified in the face of him, hiding behind the eye patch wearing man with an onion hairdo. I am Terumi Mei, leader of the rebellion against the Mizukage's Kekkei Genkei eradication movement, and overall tyrannical regime. She answered, also answering Naruto's question on her relation to the shade next to Gaara. My men and I witnessed your battle, and I wish to extend a hand to you in thanks, and perhaps an alliance with whatever village you are from? In these times of strife, Kiri will need all the help it can get now that Yagura is gone. I would also ask for your name, if you'll allow me. She added. Nodding, Naruto lowered his arms and shook her extended hand. It was no trouble. I originally came here to extend an offer to Yagura to join my group, but he appeared to be struck with genjutsu on a level one cannot break yet, so the only remaining course of action was to kill him. I desired a good battle, anyway, so it makes up for his refusal. As for alliances, I am affiliated with no village, but if you wish for an alliance, then I can extend to you my hand as the Onikage. I am Uzumaki Namikaze Naruto, previously the Kyuubi Jinchuriki, but I died. Naruto explained simply to wide eyes of his possible new allies, both at the revelation of Yagura's condition and his second surname. Naruto took his father's name in respect for him and to spite Konoha, those who denied him his heritage. Namikaze? As in the Yondaime Hokage? And what do you mean you died? And the Kyuubi? And I've never heard of an Onikage. Perhaps the land of demons has acquired a shinobi village? Mei inquired, only for Ao to clear his throat to gain her attention. Actually, Mei-sama, from my times as Yagura's aide before this apparent genjutsu was cast on him, when he commissioned several of us to look up ancient texts relating to the Biju and demons in general, there was tell of the Onikage. It was an individual of immeasurable strength with control over darkness, shadows, and something called the void. He was said to be on par with something called the Jubi, the supposed origin of the Biju, and chakra itself. He was also able to reforge the souls of other demons that rose against him into weapons that he integrated into his own body. For many centuries, he ruled over the demon realm, before he simply disappeared. At that point, there were no more records of him. Naruto-san, are you claiming to be this Onikage? Ao lectured, turning to Naruto with a stern face. With a smirk, Naruto responded, indeed I am. As the Kyuubi Jinchuriki, I was subject to discrimination, hatred, and daily mob attacks. At this, his smirk fell into a stern, neutral grimace. During the last attack, I was killed, struck right on the seal. But when the Kyuubi's chakra flooded my dying body, it awakened the blood of the Onikage within me. As such, I was reincarnated, the Kyuubi's escape attempt collapsing inward, and the Biju was snuffed out, his chakra mine. The Kyuubi is gone, and never to return. He dropped the bomb on them, to gaping mouths all around. And you saw what I could do. As the new Onikage, I can utilizing Kageton, Mighten, and Boden, and so far, I am able to channel parts of the previous Onikage's body upon my own to use his abilities. Soon, I will be able to utilize more of his body, and what I already can will be my own, needless of channeling. Upon my rebirth, I harvested the bodies of several shinobi and turned them into shades. Here, he gestured towards the two creatures beside Gaara and Yugito. And I swore an oath of vengeance against Konoha. I am currently on a quest to gather my brethren in burden, possibly found a village of my own, and destroy Konoha. Naruto finished with clenched fists. Mei frowned at the abuse Naruto faced before his rebirth, and found this tale of the Onikage fascinating. She couldn't deny the amazing abilities she witnessed in his fight with the Mizukage, and a Biju to boot. Though that raised a question. What did you do at the end, when you defeated the Sanbi? She asked. I took his chakra into my own, increasing my reserves, and turned him into another shade, much like the Kyuubi. And with it, its memories. According to them, a man claiming to be Uchiha Madara put Yagura under a genjutsu to start this eradication fiasco. He was trapped within his own body, screaming for release, drowning in regret and anguish for what he was causing, and I gave it to him. Naruto informed them, but that's impossible. Uchiha Madara has been dead for decades. How could he be the cause for the Mizukage's actions? Mei asked, immeasurably sad at the fact their enemy was a puppet to a greater madman. Before this whole fiasco, she was actually close friends with Yagura. The man even commented, on multiple occasions, that he was molding her into the next Mizukage. As I said, a man claiming to be Madara. It's obviously not him, but perhaps an idolizer who took up the name to instill fear with it alone. There is power in a name. Naruto theorized, raising his collar and hood once this conversation appeared to be at an end. Good day to you, Terumi-san. Kiri will need a new cage, and who else but the leader of the rebellion? I will relay to you the founding of my village when the time comes, and we can make this alliance official. Naruto bade farewell, beckoning his allies for them to leave, the shades sinking into the shadows. Uchiha Madara. Whoever you really are, you just made Naruto's shit list. After leaving Mei and her rebellion to their machinations, Naruto, after thinking over those Kekkei Genkei shades, decided a little side trip was required before their departed Mizu no Kuni. To the graveyard, to be specific. Kiri Cemetery. Before Yagura spurned the Kekkei Genkei eradication fiasco, those of specialized bloodlines were buried just like their fellow men, so there were plenty of graves to the Kagaya, Yuki, and Terumi clans. Fortunately, the transformation process of turning humans into shades didn't require their souls, only their bodies, decayed as they were. Extending his right arm to the side, Naruto was silent as his sleeve and glove faded away and his skin peeled off his arm, revealing pure darkness underneath, up to his elbow. By my black hand, the dead shall rise. Naruto commented as he slammed his hand onto the ground, the shaped darkness losing its restrictions and pouring into the ground like a fountain, branching under the earth and finding the corpses of several once powerful humans. The darkness in his control made a show of violently tearing up the earth in lightning bolt-like roots as they wormed their way into the caskets of shinobi, shattering the lids open and engulfing the skeletons in cocoons of darkness, clawed hands of bone, ice, and magma bursting from the ground. The new shades clawed their way to the surface, standing before Naruto as the last remnants of dirt fell off their forms, bowing, then collapsing into their shadows and joining the group's conjoined shadow, save for one Yuki shade for Naruto to inspect. The shade of a male Yuki was quite interesting, as a large, pointed cross made of ice, about the height and width of its torso, was embedded in its chest, a hole in the center to allow its hands to sink back into its chest. Two pairs of arms, also made of ice, were growing from its shoulder blades and behind its ribs, with clawed fingers, spikes on the elbows, and wristbands of smoking darkness. The bangs framing its blank face, save for a pair of blazing crimson eyes, were like fangs of ice, a frozen crown on its head, a prehensile tail of ice growing from the base of its skull like a ponytail. Its legs were remarkably humanoid, though with clawed toes and spiked knees, an arrow-headed tail growing from its tailbone, small shards of ice orbiting its length in 3 rings. Skin and cloth returning to his arm, Naruto dismissed the shade and spun around, smirking at Yugito's pale, sweaty face, then wordlessly lead the group out of the cemetery towards Kiri's dock. Sometime later, as Naruto and his group sat on the boat leaving Mizu no Kuni, he concentrated what he dubbed Onikage chakra to his face. What he told Yagura about his transformed arms were only half-truths. It was indeed a technique he created, but only after whatever force within him, probably a sliver of the first Onikage's consciousness, allowed him to. Assimilating the Sanbi's chakra was apparently a milestone for another portion of the Onikage's body to become Naruto's as a technique, allowing him to channel the visage of the demon shadow, which was actually capable of more than one would think. Using it in conjunction with the arms of the Onikage bridged the flesh between them, engulfing Naruto's shoulders, biceps, and his upper chest and back. The Onikage's face was truly intimidating, mostly black, with some dashes of ash gray or incredibly deep purple. Actually, a majority of that was in the fire that engulfed most of its head, the expanse of flesh from its eyes down untouched. His lips seemed to disappear, leaving his white fangs permanently visible, though all his canines were stretching longer than usual away from the mouth. The horns of bone from before were prominent, pointing to the sky, growing from his skull instead of just sticking to his head. His spiky hair remained, but it was indistinguishable to the flames, and thus lost to their eyes. His transformed flesh on his upper arms were like organic plating with small spikes on the shoulders, his upper back about the same, also including a spine of black bone from the base of his skull to as far as the transformation went, large pods on his shoulder blades. Everyone else trained as much as they could on the road in their darkness abilities, Gaara finding his abilities were the most flexible due to his style. His black sand could turn into almost anything, and he made it a habit of conjuring parts of Shukaku in battle, sometimes even a phantom of the Biju itself, like in Kiri. He also dabbled in earth-like darkness manipulation. Kurabi finally made a breakthrough in his training, learning from Yugito in her lightning-style darkness techniques, as the Nibi Jinchuriki seemed to be a natural in shadow techniques. He also had a couple water darkness techniques that reminded him of his ink techniques. Yugito, as stated before, was a prodigy in darkness manipulation, proficient in shadow lightning techniques, transforming her limbs with darkness, and generating weapons with shadows, while she began digging into shadow fire techniques. Naruto himself, after acquiring some information from Ao and Mei about notable shinobi techniques in history for some inspiration, had created a whole slew of darkness jutsu based on things such as the Kaguya's Shikatsumyaku, a fabled technique seen once in a blue moon from Uchiha called Susanoo, the techniques of an Iwa nuke nin by the name of Deidara, enhancing his repertoire of explosion release style darkness techniques, and many others. He also worked on his dark and void release techniques, marveling at the raw chakra manipulation he was capable of from the former, which allowed him to train in one of his father's techniques from the scrolls he took from Konoha, the Rasengan. The technique was the pinnacle of shape manipulation, and Minato intended to add nature transformation as the final step, but his untimely death prevented that. Vowing to continue his father's legacy, Naruto trained extensively in the technique, his previous experience in shape manipulation from discovering his shadow release overcoming any other possible affinity allowing him to create it easily. However, adding elements to it proved a challenge, as it required a perfect balance of shape and nature manipulation, requiring him to destabilize the Rasengan temporarily as he introduces the element. More than once, that resulted in it exploding in his face, taking off his hand and sometimes even his face. Ignoring the laughter of his comrades each time, Naruto kept trying. As for his father's Hiraishin, Naruto would need to put that off until he delved into Fuinjutsu, his father's scroll not supplying any books on the subject. Perhaps he thought his fate in Konoha would have been completely different, and they could be supplied to him from elsewhere. Either way, it would have to wait. As the boat sailed from the westernmost island in Mizu no Kuni, Naruto tapped into his shade network to find his next comrades to be. The Yonbi and Gobi Jinchuriki were in Iwagakure, and the Nanabis was in Taki, but the Rokubis was nowhere to be found, at least not near any villages. His network wasn't entirely comprehensive. Perhaps he was wandering about, avoiding major villages for some reason. Well, until then, Iwa was their next destination. Just for fun, he connected his mind's eye to the shades in Konoha. Hokage's tower. You were a fool, Hiruzen, to let the Jinchuriki escape. A man about as old as Hiruzen commented, his single visible eye narrowed in disappointment. He had bandages around his head and covering his right eye, an X-shaped scar on his chin, his right arm in a sling fashioned from the sleeve of his dark gray robe, his white undershirt reaching to just behind the wrist of his left hand holding onto a cane. I believe you were the one to bring forth this plan of keeping the Jinchuriki loyal by having him beaten by mobs instigated by your nay, then I arrived to save him. Your mob went too far and killed the boy, and the Kyuubi did something to him. Now he has a completely justifiable vendetta against Konoha because of you, Danzo. Hiruzen replied just as bitterly, drawing Naruto's ire towards his opposite. Willing more shades to concentrate on this conversation, Naruto's mental vision was thrown into a wall of screens made from the various angles they watched from. Find out everything you can about him and this nay. Naruto ordered his shades, watching as some latched onto Danzo's shadow, unnoticed, before they followed his chakra's signature to whatever these nay were. Others slithered towards him and snuck under his bandages and into the sling. Spying something that infuriated Naruto. Sharingan. Danzo's arm, and his right eye, were littered with Sharingan eyes, and was that the Shodem's face on his shoulder? This man was a walking abomination, but he couldn't have done this alone. Oh, what's this? A shade possibly thinking ahead snuck into the Sandame's desk and spied some documents on Orochimaru? Ah, one of the Sannin. Apparently a traitor, he was last seen in some underground lab conducting experiments on humans, which apparently had been going on for months. With this document on Orochimaru came some papers on his subjects. Jugo, a boy from a clan capable of passively taking in nature energy and utilizing it into sage transformations. Every member was afflicted with bouts of insanity and rage from the nature energy pervading their bodies. Orochimaru used his enzymes to create what would be the curse mark. One Mitarashi Anko given such a thing before he left. He was currently held in some prison to the north, his purpose fulfilled. An unnamed boy, given the title Tenzo. He was inducted into the Anbu and hang about. That hairstyle and face guard looks familiar. Was that one of the Anbu that didn't hate him before he left? Interesting. His document says he was injected with the Shodem's cells, so that means he could utilize wood release. And what's this? Orochimaru got his hands on an Uchiha, so why didn't he? Wait, this Shin wasn't a true Uchiha. He could just accept any genetic material, and thus had a large amount of Sharingan grafted to his body all over, but he was missing his right arm. Perhaps that was the arm Danzo had? Anyway, after a couple experiments, Uchiha Shin went his own way from Orochimaru, and seemed to have disappeared off the face of the earth for now. Well, this was all very interesting. There were two ways to go about with this information. Eliminate Orochimaru and any loyal lackeys, take his minions willing to switch sides, and use his resources, which included all of the newly renamed Oto no Kuni, to destroy Konoha, or forge an alliance, work with the man due to their alike agendas, then eliminate him if he proved no longer useful or traitorous himself. By the end of that thought, he received a mental nudge that told him his shades found the Nei base. Looking within, he found it was a comprehensive series of tunnels right under the Hokage monument. Clever, Danzo, very clever. Pushing that information to the side for a later date, Naruto cut the link to his shades and opened his eyes. We're going to Iwa, he announced suddenly, causing everyone to jump slightly, since until then it had been completely silent. Why there? Despite you declaring war on Konoha, if people find out who you are, we'll become public enemy number one. Yugito brought up, which is why they won't find out. Besides, 4 and 5 tails are there, we'll ask them to join. After that, we'll head to Taki for 7. We'll need to hold off finding 6 until he shows up within range of my network. Naruto explained. Blinking in slight surprise at his forward thinking, Yugito nodded and went silent. What do you know about all of them, from your network? Gaara asked. 4 is aged and experienced, he is a master of Yotan, and is hated by the village, the same for 5, who utilizes steam manipulation. They go by Roshi and Han, and appear to live outside the village, yet remain hopeful that their comrades will see the error of their ways soon enough, though Han's belief is wavering quicker than his elders. 7, however, has a deep hatred for humanity from her treatment from the village. She might be easy to convince to join our group once we tell her we're Jinchuriki, her name is Fu. Roshi and Han will take a little convincing, but I believe we can bring them over to our side. Naruto explained. Now, as for the relative future, what are your opinions on Orochimaru of the Sannin? He brought up, surprising everyone at the change in topic. Orochimaru? I myself do not know much, other than that he is a traitor to Konoha and, as one of the Sannin, is quite powerful. Gaara responded. Orochimaru came to the Raikage about 2 years ago, asking about attacking Konoha, but Asama refused. Why do you ask? Yugito asked. My shades found interesting documents on the Sannin within the Sandaime Hokage's desk. Apparently, he has several interesting test subjects, including a boy who is the origin of Orochimaru's curse mark, a wood release user now Anbu in Konoha, and one of the few who don't hate me, and a false Uchiha. Upon the several confused looks he received, Naruto elaborated. Apparently this Shin became obsessed with the clan and grafted several Sharingan onto his body, his right arm transplanted to the leader of an officially disbanded group of emotionless Anbu. His whereabouts are currently unknown, but if you all believe our group would benefit from him, then I'm sure we can find him. But more to the point, Orochimaru, ally or liability? He asked. Liability, definitely. Yugito responded almost immediately. Liability. He's too dangerous and conniving to have as an ally for any length of time. Gaara answered after a few seconds of deliberation. Fool, ya fool, isn't it simple? We pop that fool like a pimple. Kurabi answered in his own, special way. Chuckling at the group consensus, Naruto nodded. Agreed. When the opportunity arises, we will dispose of Orochimaru. But it will not be easy, and not anytime soon. We should not let our powers cloud our judgment, especially I. I admit I've become arrogant with these leaps in power, but I count on you 3, and any others we bring into our fold, to bring me down to earth. With that business done, what should we do about those 3 I mentioned? First off, Jugo. Naruto initiated for them to begin discussion. What more can you tell us about him from the document? Gaara asked. Once Orochimaru harvested the necessary enzymes for his curse mark, including spare samples for the foreseeable future, he exiled the boy to a base to the north. He's behind one of the strongest and most secure doors they have, the building filled with the failed, mutated subjects of Orochimaru's venturing into the second level of his curse mark. He also appears to suffer from fits of rage and insanity, attempting to kill everything in his path. Before he was taken away, another of Orochimaru's minions, the last Kagaya, was the only one able to calm him down. With this Kimimaro gone, his anger is left unchecked. Naruto answered hesitantly. Do the documents say how the Kagaya kept him in check? Gaara asked. Referring to his connection with the shade looking over the document, Naruto responded a second later. Killer intent and skill to overpower his fits. If we recruit him, I believe any one of us can keep him in check. His clan's bloodline allows him to naturally absorb natural energy and use it to augment and transform his body. Also, he can talk to animals. He added the last part flatly. Like, squirrels and shit? Yugito asked just as flatly. Yes, like squirrels and shit. Anyway, yay or nay? Naruto asked. I say go for it. The idea of taking away every acid of the snake before we finally kill him just seems really appealing. Yugito responded. Agreed. Gaara concurred with his sister in burden. Hell yeah, let's bring the pain. Taking everything he built will be our gain. Kurabi, agreed? It's hard to tell what he's saying, sometimes. Very well. And the Kagaya? Also, at the facility where Jugo is, Orochimaru left one of his subordinates in charge, an Uzumaki. Should we recruit her as well? Naruto brought up hesitantly. Okay, hold on. You got shades in every village, right? Yugito asked, receiving a nod. Then just use the ones in Orochimaru's village to scout out potential recruits so we don't have to go, and then. She advised. Thankful for his high collar hiding his light blush at not thinking of that before, Naruto did as she said and connected his mind's eye to the shades in the recently founded Otogakure no Sato. The Kagaya appears to be part of something Orochimaru calls his Sound 5. Their members, beside the Kagaya, include a boy who can absorb chakra, a six-armed boy with a third eye and the spider summoning contract, a pair of twins sharing a body due to their special Kekkei Genkai that deals in cellular assimilation, and a girl hailing from a demon summoning clan with her flute. He also has a right-hand man named Yakushi Kabuto, who is proficient in medical ninjutsu and possibly learned tactics from Orochimaru, so he might be just as cunning and slippery. Naruto listed off Orochimaru's more notable underlings. The Sound 5 sound promising, but this Kabuto boy, it is possible he is just as corrupted as his master. Even if we recruit him, I believe he would turn on us if something more appealing appeared before him. If we are to recruit anyone from Oto, Kabuto would be the exception, in my opinion. Gaara offered his opinion. Agreed. So Orochimaru and Kabuto die? He asked for clarification. Receiving a round of nods, he moved back to the subject of his fellow clansmen. And the girl I mentioned? Obviously recruit her. Yugito responded, a smile on her face at the idea of getting Naruto some family, Gaara and Kurabi agreeing. Though hidden, Naruto smiled back and nodded as well. Very well. And the Anbu with wood release? He asked. Blinking thrice, Yugito thought it over, interrupted by Gaara before she could answer. I say we try to recruit him, as well as the other Anbu you said didn't seem to hate you. However, if they refuse due to loyalties towards Konoha, you know what must be done, Naruto. He reminded the unofficial leader of the group, bringing him back to cold, cruel reality with the notion of striking down the few who didn't hate him for his burden. Eyes softening in sadness, Naruto mutely nodded. I know, I just hope it doesn't come to that. And this Shin? He asked to change the subject. Oh, definitely murder him dead. Yugito answered quite intelligently, pretty much summing up the group's thoughts on the man. Chuckling at her answer, Naruto nodded nonetheless. This Uchiha Shin had to die before he could cause any sorts of problems for them. Well, that's everything sorted. Now, we just wait till we hit land and make for Iwa. He announced. 3 hours later, making sure only half an hour after their discussion, Naruto and his group immediately made for the forest, blazing through it to the northwest, for Tsuchi no Kuni. Okay, once we make it to Tsuchi and run into any shinobi, act like you're missing nin from your respective countries, and Gaara. Naruto began, gaining the ex-Ichibi Jinchuriki's attention. Don't mention you being the Kage's son. Knowing he received a nod, he continued. Same for you too, don't mention your relationship to the Raikage. He spoke to Yugito and B, and of course, no surnames for me. Can't have them think they have a free Uzumaki on their hands, or some revenge on the Yondaime Hokage. These fools are so narrow-minded, sometimes. Is everyone understood? He asked one final time, receiving a trio of nods behind him. Good. Now, is anyone up for a spar? According to my shades, we're far enough from any village so we won't attract attention. Landing on the ground with them, Naruto turned on the spot to find a pair of smirks sent his way, courtesy of Yugito and Kurabi. Gaara didn't smile that often, but his black sand was floating around him, showing he was antsy as well. I guess that'll be a yes. Who wants to go first? He asked, chuckling. Me first. Yugito piped up before B or Gaara could say anything, already speeding forward to stand opposite to him. Chuckling again at her childlike exuberance, Naruto nodded. Very well, Yugi-chan, don't hold back, throw everything you've got at me. He demanded, receiving a feral nod as she dropped to all fours, her body turning pitch black and taking on the characteristics of fire. Various wisps forming on her body as a pair of tails grew from her tailbone. Yugito had learned to sync her Biju chakra with her new darkness abilities, creating what she referred to as Kage Nibi Chakra Moto. Shadow Two Tails Chakra Mode, her yellow eyes blazed through the darkness of her new form, her pupils turning to slits. She created this technique from the information Kurabi provided, when he used the Hachibi's chakra up to 4 tails and threw the idea and some methods back and forth with Matabi. The Nibi herself took to the influence and presence of the darkness surprisingly well, making the technique all that much easier. Smirking at her technique, Naruto's hands took on the same qualities as Yugito's body, holding his black, flaming palms towards her and shooting large orbs of darkness at her, which she dodged. Finding she was within his guard, Naruto quickly crossed his arms just in time for them to be sliced off by Yugito's claw swipe. A spear of darkness shoved through his stomach and pinning him to a tree from its short flight. As was expected, his stumps and the detached arms went up in smoking shadow, with a red glow, and they were reformed, Naruto's control over darkness ridding him of the staking weapon in his torso. Before he slapped his hands on either side of the tree behind him, the shadows spreading down it and across their current battlefield, eyes and mouths forming in it. "Well, that's just cheating," the relatively demonized Yugito commented flatly. Ignoring that, she quickly acted by forming wings from the darkness shrouding her body, staying out of the reach of Naruto's technique. She crossed her arms, swiping them outward, several large spikes made of darkness shooting towards the Nidaime Onikage. Boten. Shinra Tensei. With an explosion of gravity, Naruto was saved from being skewered. "Shall the kid's glove come off, Yugi-chan?" he asked with a smirk. "Oh, and everything else, if you please," Yugito purred in response. "I swear, every second I'm around you, I think I need an adult." Naruto responded flatly, even as his head, shoulders, and arms transformed into those of the first Onikage. "But we are adults, Naru-kun," she responded with the same tone, undeterred by his appearance. Sinking with the Nibi in this way sort of erased that uneasiness. "Somehow that doesn't make me feel better," Naruto responded, his voice much deeper, gaining a second layer as if another person spoke with him, with a tone of absolute evil and dark intent. Cutting her off before she could derail what is supposed to be a spar, Naruto took to the skies himself as his legs, from the knees down, turned to smoke like shadow that rose him up. Just before her eyes, Yugito watched as the Onikage's flesh overtook the rest of Naruto's upper body, eliminating his coat. Apparently, Naruto forced the transformation to advance to this state, evident by his momentary panting from the effort, but it passed. The Onikage's completed torso was fashioned with organic plating imitating the muscles, but with some extras. An extra shawl-like plate grew across the top of his torso, hanging across his pectorals and upper back, resting on his shoulders, fringed with equidistant spikes and bearing a red eye-like gem in the center, like his gauntlets. The plating on his ribs had claws that seemed to cradle what appeared to be black flames within his stomach. The spine from the base of his neck continued down the rest of his new back, stopping at his waist, and the pods on his shoulder blades grew 4 more under them, creating 6 in all, each pair smaller than the previous. Cracking his neck and rolling his shoulders, Naruto was prepared to continue their spar, only for him to sense something, disappearing in an explosion of darkness, appearing again with Yugito's guard, grabbing her and throwing her out of the sky. Just as Yugito screamed, demanding an explanation, she saw a massive fireball flying towards her previous spot, now occupied by Naruto. Before she could even scream in fear for his life, Naruto took the attack full force, the ensuing explosion accelerating her descent, only for Gaara to catch her in his sand-like darkness. She spied Kurabi using one of his new darkness techniques, in preparation for something she couldn't see. Much like Gaara's usage of darkness, B manifested it in the form of his Biju, but he fashioned it into the Hachibi's manifestation when he entered the higher form of his version 2 cloak, i.e. 3 bull skeletons made of shadows sprouting from his mid-back. He also had a pair of tendrils down his arms with branching claws to imitate a spine, leading to bull skulls that covered the fronts of his fists, acting as knuckle dusters. From the smoke cloud in the sky came a sphere of darkness, which broke apart to reveal an unscathed Naruto, who dropped down to join his comrades. "What happened? Where'd that fireball come from?" Yugito asked, her chakra cloak having fallen while she looked around in confusion. "More Konoha shinobi," Naruto responded simply, drawing a frown from Yugito, who nodded at his unsaid order, putting up her cloak again to help decimate them, like before. Descending from the trees came Konoha Anbu, like before, but their masks were completely blank, and Naruto, still bearing the Kyuubi's negative emotion sense from assimilating its chakra, sensed pure emptiness from them, no emotions at all. He also sensed they had higher chakra reserves than those Anbu from before. "Uzumaki Naruto, we are here to extend an invitation for you to join Danzo-sama's organization, nay." The supposed leader droned. Naruto's bright crimson eyes widened in shock at the mention of nay. Narrowing them and growling lowly, Naruto formed large orbs of darkness in his hands. You can take that offer and shove it. I know that your Danzo-sama is the primary reason I died, and suffered as I did in Konoha. He, and all others, shall burn. You tangle with forces beyond your comprehension, and now you shall pay the consequences. He responded, slamming the orbs into the ground, creating a darkness that gave those who stood on it, as it spread, the sense of standing in oblivion and about to fall. I am as a god, for I bring life from the dirt. He commented, as the darkness below them rose from the earth, taking the form of a new breed of monster in Naruto's control. Flesh of shadow gave way to a grated headpiece across its eyes above a zigzag mouth. A crimson light shining from within, beneath a forest of what might be hair, bright red as well, glowing as if lava, cascading down its back like a mane. 2 locks coming forward and hardened into a pair of horns, the rest turning into black arms, complete with clawed hands. On the center of its chest was the symbol on Naruto's and Yugito's faces, bright red as if cut into the flesh. Some sort of smoke mass in its stomach, cradled in claws on its ribs. It had 4 arms, the first pair behind the second, with pieces of organic armor on all the shoulders in the shape of large spikes. Small versions of the possible Onikage marking on the tops of the forearms, near the elbows, with red lines flowing down the sides of the forearms to the wrists, branching down each finger to completely engulf the clawed tips. Its legs were digitigrade, the upper legs were completely armored down to the knees, ending in spikes, the backs of its legs red like the underbelly of a reptile, ending in clawed toes. A long tail grew from its tailbone, ending in 3 large hooks like some kind of demonic hand. I am the end of all things, great and small, for I herald the coming darkness. Run away, tiny mortals, or be swallowed by eternity, for the universe began in darkness, and shall end in darkness. Naruto waxed poetically before sicking his creature on them, watching as they attempted to fight it off, a contingent breaking away by the skin of their teeth to face what they now perceived as the lesser threats, the Jinchuriki. Counting at least 30 men. Guess Danzo thought ahead. Knowing Naruto would decline, Naruto jumped away, leading about 8 ne with him as Yugito, Gaara, and Kurabi dealt with the remaining 12. Do you truly believe you can convince me of returning to Konoha? Your men can hardly handle my beast, how can you hope to measure up to me? Naruto asked, curious and amused. It's obvious your beast is the real threat. Many a fool relies on the strength of a summon when theirs is lacking. While they distract it, we handle you 3. Danzo-sama asked for you, but I'm sure he'd appreciate 2 more Jinchuriki for Konoha. The leader responded, drawing his tanto. Naruto rolled his eyes at their idiocy and tucked his arms behind his back, the pods on his shoulder blades opening and oozing black smoke onto them. Remember that sentiment as I tear you apart. I'll warn you, I'm known for playing with my prey. He advised them, mentally commending them when they were undeterred, unlike the Anbu from before that showed fear in the face of him. He swung his arms out, revealing his dark work as they spoke. His transformed arms were drastically smaller, now the width of the rest of Naruto's arms, the eyes missing and replaced with glowing purple runes all over the forearms and the bit on top of the hands. Some runes were shaped like animals, but the luminescence of them made it difficult to figure out exactly what they were. The overall armor now had spikes sweeping back on the edges, though it was also made of multiple plates layered over one another, tipped with spiked elbows. There is only one reason I am the way I am, pertaining to you Konoha scum who won't leave me alone. I am here to. He started, taking a horse stance and slamming his fists together, resulting in a shockwave of black and purple chakra, before disappearing in a burst of speed, reappearing between the first 3 of them. Break your bodies, he continued, simultaneously slamming both his fists into the spine of the ne in front of him, the side of the one to his left, and his foot into the stomach of the one behind him, sending them all flying before their comrades could do anything. Those 3 would be dead within minutes, if not seconds, due to immediate broken bones and liquefied organs from the force of Naruto's attacks, as well as how roughly they landed wherever. Spinning around to face the remaining 5, the glow of Naruto's arms brightened and he thrust them forward, the sides of them and the backmost parts flashing before those same sections came to life and jumped off Naruto's arms, made of doubles, coming together to form 2 demonic bats with the sides of his forearms forming the wings, the heads a trio of spikes for the snout and ears. their small torsos appearing to be made of a black ribcage holding some sort of smoking masses. With a hand gesture from Naruto, his summons flew towards two Ne, the bladed wing of one of them hacking off the arm of one of Danzo's men, the second demon having better aim and outright dive bombing the other man in the center of the chest, its arrowhead and bladed wings slicing the man clear in half. The first bat made up for its folly by looking at its victim, a purple orb of chakra with black electricity forming at the tip of its face, and shooting forward, splattering the man's head off his shoulders. Clapping his hands together and outstretching them, keeping them together with fingers pointed forward, Naruto had his little summons fly back towards him and meld with his arms again, but with their wings outstretched, forming an X shape in front of him, as an orb of black chakra sparking with electricity formed between his opened hands. Yami Komori Shato. Dark bat shot. The projectile shot forward, nearly tripling in size as it flew, immediately atomizing the upper torso of a Ne it shot through, continuing until it hit the earth in the middle of those that remained, killing the last two men in a large explosion Naruto contained with void chakra to not devastate this part of the forest. Relaxing once the dust fell, the wings on his arms disappearing, Naruto admired his handiwork before using void chakra to fly towards the closest of his allies, Gaara. Touching down in the shade of the surrounding trees, Naruto watched Gaara as he fought, assessing his current level in darkness manipulation. Sabaku no Gaara found himself surrounding by 7 Ne, his black sand hovering around him, shifting slightly as both sides were still, waiting for the other to make a move. Deciding he waited long enough, Gaara shot forward, his arms armored and baying for the blood of those who could take away his first friend. His claws were blocked by the tanto of his nearest target, catching a fist heading for his stomach to throw him back. Tearing the tanto out of his hand and using his grip as leverage, Gaara lifted the man off his feet and slammed his free fist into his stomach, embedding him in the ground in a crater, but not killing him. Ne were made of sterner stuff, apparently. Punting him away, Gaara used his darkness sand to block an attack to his flank, making it spike up to either kill or push the attacker away. Unfortunately, the latter happened. Glaring at his enemies, Gaara began the slow process of completely armoring himself up, starting with what he could already do instantly, then working his way up. The armor began climbing up his biceps and encasing his lower legs now, his greaves layered like his gauntlets but lacking the widening down the length facet, complete with clawed toes. Thanks to advice from Naruto, Gaara began working on a more active fighting style instead of staying still and using his sand for everything, in case he dealt with very quick opponents who could somehow bypass his sand, or just blitz through it, and get to him. He also began training in using Shukaku's chakra to strengthen himself, and something similar to Yugito's Kage Nibi Chakra Moto, but it wasn't perfected. When he tried to cloak himself in the chakra, he tended to turn into a mini Shukaku. With all that in mind, Gaara struck again, lunging towards the nearest Ne, halfway up his shoulders and just above his knees now armored. He landed the first blow, a knee to his stomach, sending him flying, and created a ball of darkness in his palm, blasting it at another Ne, only for the shinobi to bring up a wall of water to block it, the others launching various projectiles of varying elements right at him. Tucking himself into a ball and bringing the sand close to him in a sphere, Gaara shielded himself from the onslaught, being thrown around in his ball of condensed sand. Once the attacks stopped, and the ball was at rest, Gaara arose from its shadow, lifting it above himself. He jumped and threw it at the group, the front half jumping out of its way, the lagging three attempting to stop it with 3 large torrents of wind, only for its weight to render them useless and splatter the centermost over the grass and trees, the ball falling apart as sand once it stopped, returning to Gaara, drawing their attention to the progress of his armor. His arms were completely encased in armor, the shoulder pads being black with silver trim like the rest of his armor, and now his hips were clad, a mouthpiece forming on his face with a silver, zigzag grin, and armor forming down his spine. He narrowed his eyes at them, and slammed his armored hands on the ground, causing large boulders made of darkness to pop up, which he picked up with giant arms made of black sand, throwing them and breaking the arms down as bullets to follow them. The boulder and bullets took out 3 men, leaving another 3 to face the youngest child of the current cage. By the time the last 3 stopped jumping around to escape death, Gaara was completely armored, which marked their doom, in Naruto's opinion. Time's up, nay. Naruto, having reverted to normal, whispered from his perch, snapping his fingers to signify their end, coinciding with Gaara leaping towards them. Gaara's mouthpiece grew forward to turn into a small muzzle for the helmet that grew over his head, complete with small ears on top, pointing to the sides like the Ichibi's own, and thick armor forming on Gaara's torso, all complete with silver trim and the natural curse marks of Shukaku. A prehensile tail formed at Gaara's tailbone, a perfect match to the Ichibi's minus color. Like this, Gaara tapped into Shukaku's chakra, turning him a bit feral and bloodthirsty, but when you roll with Naruto, that's a given. Lunging forward, Gaara swiped his claw downward, shattering the defending Ni's Tanto, leaving him open for the following disemboweling claw, tearing straight through his stomach. Still alive, the Ne felt, through the pain, this demon in human skin grabbing his spine, ripping it out with great force, bringing the man down with his main form of support gone, caving his skull in with a stomp. Manifesting sand in his hand and having it crawl down his latest prize, Gaara created a whip, covered in spikes on each vertebrae, that could extend at his will, tipped with a jagged blade. Rearing his weapon back and shooting it forward, stretching it to cross the distance between Gaara and his prey. The speed of the weapon allowed him to slice off the arm of one of the shinobi, resulting in him screaming in agony, emotional training be damned. Appearing in front of him in a burst of speed, Gaara grabbed him by digging his claws into his chest, picking him up and throwing him at his only remaining comrade, whipping his weapon right after him. Not seeing the tactic coming, the standing Ne couldn't react accordingly, resulting in a large blade tearing its way through his flying comrade and embedding it into his chest, the blade morphing slightly to have a hook tip so it would pull him along. For when Gaara pulled his whip back, black sand collecting around his opposite arm until it formed into Shukaku's arm, black and silver, of course, the claw tips stretching so the hand could encompass both Ne when they got in range. They struggled for a bit, but Gaara ended that soon enough. Karaku Susu. His engorged appendage collapsed in on itself, crushing the men into dust, which joined his black sand as the arm and armor began to break down, the red head panting slightly once his adrenaline began to die down. Did you enjoy the show? Gaara asked aloud, revealing he knew Naruto was there the entire time. Granted, Naruto didn't exactly try to hide himself from his ally, his oneness with darkness hiding him from the Ne, but that same oneness revealing to Gaara he was there. But if he wanted to, Naruto could have been completely undetected. Very much so. Naruto responded with amusement in his voice as he stepped out from the tree's shadow. It appears your training has shown with how you achieved a completely armored form and kept it stable, instead of turning into the Ichibi. Granted, that was how I observed it from the outside. How was it on your psyche? He asked, showing genuine concern for his ally. A bit of agitation from using Shukaku's chakra, and the obvious bloodlust, but I didn't feel like I was going to lose myself to it. Gaara explained, assuaging his fears. That is very good to hear. Perhaps another training session or two is required to completely get rid of those effects. By the way, loved the trick with the spine, very creative. Naruto commented with a chuckle. Responding with a small smile, Gaara shared the sentiment. Thank you, I learned from the best. He commented, oh, you're flattering M. Yugito is a very good teacher. Gaara interrupted uncharacteristically cheekily. Now that was just cruel. Naruto responded. At this, Gaara actually laughed heartily. Wiping a tear from his eye, he calmed down. Like I said, Yugito is a good teacher. At being, as she says, a cheeky cunt. He said, this is true. Naruto nodded. Chuckling himself, he pat Gaara on the back. Come on, let's go find those two, make sure they don't play with their food. He said, dispersing as a mess of black squares. At the same time Gaara turned into black sand, flying towards their remaining allies. Both Yugito and Kurabi double-teaming the remaining 15 Ne. With Yugito and B. Kaden. Bakanekoyari. Fire release. Monster cat spear. Clapping her hands together and stretching them apart, the Nibi's blue flames forming between them and forming a spear. Yugito grasped it and quickly threw it at the Ne faster than some of them could track, and unfortunately for others, react, killing 5 in a large explosion of blue flames and Biju chakra. Acting quick, already in her cage Nibi Chakra Moto, Yugito manifested 4 copies of the Biju's face stretching out on appendages from her back, all of their, and her own, mouths filled with broiling flames. With a roar, she breathed a wall of flames alongside the Nibi heads, taking out only another 3 Nei. Naruto and Gaara, having arrived after the dome of blue fire subsided, were impressed with her fire manipulation, a facet of her abilities they thought was forgotten in the wake of her heritage from Kaminari no Kuni. They watched as Kurabi came to her aid when the remaining 7 Nei attempted to push an advantage during the lull after Yugito's latest attack, armed with his knuckle dusters and his 8 blades floating around him due to clumps of darkness around their handles manipulated by him. Kicking away the Nei closest to her, B hollered in exhilaration, lightning chakra climbing up his body towards the space between his extended index and pinky fingers, forming a small ball of electricity. Moving it to float above his palm, B channeled more chakra to it, increasing the size to, eerily, the same size as Naruto's Rasengan. I feel like he's taking a shot at me with that. Naruto thought flatly, a tick mark forming on his forehead. Raigandama, lightning sphere bomb, using shape manipulation to hold in the mass of churning lightning. Not having nearly as much prowess in the subject as Naruto, Kurabi charged forward on a, seemingly, suicide run for the closest Nei, shoving it into his stomach. At the same time, B let go of his control on the containment, bathing himself, his victim, and 2 other Nei in a dome of erratic lightning, frying the people inside. Despite Yugito screaming at his idiocy, and Gaara's eyes widening in shock, Naruto saw, perfectly clearly, B smirking before he dispersed into ink. Putting his annoyance at having his technique stolen aside, Naruto chuckled at B's tactic. Fool the enemy into thinking you sacrificed yourself while killing only a few of them. He watched as Kurabi, having used the distraction to appear behind the remaining 4 Nei, stabbed the nearest 2 with his floating blades, impaling them in various places, holding them up to deal the killing blow with a pair of black lances he made from his arms, tossing their bodies aside and rushing towards the last 2 at the same time as Yugito. Once she caught her breath, the blonde taking a book from her Jinchuriki-style sensei and catching them with a pair of lariats. B slamming his spiked fists into the smalls of their backs, temporarily flipping them in complete circles before they both threw them into the air. Yugito's arms and B's face, oddly, turning into black lightning. Roaring together, they turned their transformed parts upwards and released their attacks, sending a trio of black lightning beams, which soon merged into a single massive pillar of lightning that almost immediately disintegrated the Nei. Once the attacks finished, they relaxed their stances and deactivated their respective shadow techniques, turning to their clapping leader and comrade. Very nice. A bit dramatic with the roaring, but effective and lethal in execution. Now, was that a dig at my Rasengan, B? Naruto asked with a twitching eye and tick mark on his forehead. Hey. Nah, of course not, 9-0. You know that's not how the killa B roll. He responded, before whipping out his notepad and writing something down, shaking his head at that rhyme. Sighing and choosing to let it go, Naruto turned to everyone. Well, with that out of the way, we can move on towards our objective. We'll need to avoid any villages as much as we can, but we may need to stop off at 1 or 2 for an inn or food. Other than that, we'll be going non-stop towards Tsuchi. At our previous pace, we should reach the border around midnight tomorrow. Once we reach it, we won't need to get too close to Iwa, as the Jinchuriki live in a cottage southwest of it, for obvious reasons. Now, let's go, he ordered, and they all disappeared in blurs of speed, continuing their previous path northwest. After a while, Yugito sped forward to be beside Naruto. Hey Naruto-kun, what was that explosion we heard over in your area? And I didn't sense a drop in your darkness powers. Were you playing with your food again? She teased. Not breaking stride, Naruto chuckled slightly as he was seemingly caught. Yes, I kept the Onikage powers active for 2 reasons. 1, the longer I have them active, the more my body can get used to them, thus adapting them to my body and thus making it second nature, and 2, I just felt like playing with them. And that explosion was a new technique I've been working on with the Onikage's arms. I'll show you later. For now, let's head to Iwa and see what we can do with our brothers. He said, everyone nodding and following him to the northwest, Naruto bringing his mighty creature from before back into its home in the shadows. In about half a day, they made it to the high, Tsuchi border and crossed it without hassle. Well, those border patrolmen weren't exactly a hassle for them. Did that count? and continued towards the cottage Naruto's shades kept watching for him, southwest of Iwa like he said. Halfway there, on a whim, Yugito decided to try that shadow jet thing Naruto did in their interrupted spar, finding it propelled her much faster than they moved, though that ended up with her slamming into a tree. "Hey, I found a thing," Yugito grunted before she fell off the tree. "Apparently. Where did you come up with that idea?" Naruto asked, standing above her. "I got it from you, from our spar." Yugito answered. "I didn't do that. I turned my legs into darkness and had it hold me aloft. You appeared to use the shadows around us to propel yourself forward." Naruto observed with a tilt of the head. Humming, he tried to recreate what she did, latching onto the shadows and having them hold him up and move him around without himself moving. "Well, this could allow us to move around faster. You too, try it. Just grab the shadows around us with your own and tell them to move you," he advised Gaara and Kurabi, who nodded and attempted just that, slowly reaching success. It was relatively easy to accomplish with their already commendable bases in manipulating darkness. Yugito got up from her position on the ground, excited at having discovered something pertaining to the darkness that Naruto didn't, and tried it again, this time without slamming into a tree. Were anyone else to happen upon the group, they'd find a comical display as 4 shinobi slid around the field like hyped-up puppies, one of them whooping like a little kid. 3 guesses who? Just 5 minutes later, they all got it under control and were competent enough to not run into trees. "Most excellent. This will expedite our journey by quite a bit. Just don't hit anything, let's go," Naruto ordered, and they all blurred forward, to bring in more to the family. Demon thought. "Let's begin. So, what do you say?" Naruto asked Han and Roshi after giving them a watered-down version of their collective stories and why they were here. Han was a real mountain of a man, even taller than Kurabi, in red samurai armor under dark clothes, including, of all things, a steam furnace in the back. Considering his biju, it was somewhat understandable. Due to his size, burden, and overall demeanor, Han was ostracized by Iwa more harshly than his elder, Roshi, and thus he wanted to agree almost immediately, only abstaining for Roshi's word. Roshi, on the other hand, was an aged man of normal stature with burning red hair, a strange crown-like headpiece and strip of armor across his nose, and magenta clothing under light armor. Roshi was a close friend of the Tsuchikage, Onoki, since the last 2 wars, of which they were both witness to. However, Onoki's teachings under the previous Tsuchikage, Mu, and his own tenure slowly caused them to drift apart, the village's ostracizing of him and his many years of experience jading him to the world. He was more contemplative of their offer, almost appearing to be meditating on the idea, all eyes on him. The boy's words were persuasive, and his ability to relate, heck, even surpass them in terms of burden, played no small part. While he didn't wish to harm his friend, maybe it was time to strip the villages of their not-so-secret weapons dependent on human suffering. "Are you prepared for the consequences of bringing us along? Our camp is surrounded by a perimeter of fuinjutsu that will alert nearly half Iwa's dust to our leaving the area. Last time it happened, they got here in less than 3 minutes." Roshi simultaneously agreed and warned Naruto. "Konoha, Kiri, Kumo, might as well add you to our list." Yugito commented with a grin. "Should we count Konoha twice because of those nay?" Gaara asked rhetorically. "They'll be dealt with just fine, I feel like venting," Naruto answered while telling his group that he wished to handle them himself. Apparently the very idea of a perimeter seal pissed him off. "So are we going to be transformed, too?" Han spoke up, elated that Roshi agreed. While it was nice that he'd be with fellow Jinchuriki, it was nice to have a familiar face around. "Yes, I apologize for any discomfort." Naruto stepped forward, sinking his hands into their chests and implanting darkness in their hearts, the both of them going through the less intensive process of simply receiving black hair and yellow eyes. "Well, that was weird and anticlimactic," Han commented, clenching his hands as he felt a new connection with those present, possibly the darkness. "Just like Kurabi and, to an extent, Yugito-chan, your age minimizes the required changes your bodies need to accommodate your new ability to manipulate darkness. While on the outside it seems fairly simple, inside is where the magic happens. Your hearts have completely subsumed the darkness I introduced to them, turning into veritable factories and doorways, connecting you to the realm of darkness and any other users, such as us." You are also connected to the various shades we created from other shinobi and can control them just like us. Your bodies have also become like ours. You no longer bleed and will heal greater than you might from your biju. And any elements you may be able to control can now be replicated with darkness. How have the biju taken to the introduction of darkness, by the way? Matabi was quite welcoming while Gyuki was cautious. I'm interested in how your tenants are affected. Naruto queried. Sun is antsy. The darkness makes him nervous. It's alive, isn't it? Roshi asked. In a sense, yes. The shadows all around us are connected to a realm of darkness, though to call it a realm is a bit of a misnomer. Realm would mean there are denizens, there are. Space is the substance the realm is known for do not occupy. Such is not true here. The realm of darkness is more like a source, an all-consuming being from which the shadows are connected to. Even I'm not sure if it is a complete consciousness, but there is something connected to us on a level one believe beyond us, at least for now. Naruto provided as best he could before turning to Han for his biju's comments on the darkness. Kakuo was all huffy at first, but he calmed down as I myself got used to the feeling. Han provided simply. So where are we going now, Naru-kun? Yugito asked with an excited smile. Well, until my shades find the Rokubi container. We're headed for. Naruto froze mid-sentence as some of his shades that latched onto a ship leaving the east coast of Hai no Kuni showed him something. The ship was attacked by what appeared to be summon animals and, latching onto their shadows to follow them to their base. Showing him a strange facility on an island where researchers were apparently doing work on creating the ultimate summoning beast. The creature was loose and rampant, consuming any remaining summons and slaughtering the scientists before turning its eyes on the lone combatant. A red-haired girl brought in to seal the beast. We're leaving now, Nato said in a deadly serious voice, casting his hands to the ground as they were all engulfed in darkness, falling into the portal he made and thrust into the network created by his shades all across the elemental nations, barreling towards the island in less than a second. Floating within the darkness, time slowed so they could speak. Why the sudden urgency? Where are we going, anyway? Yugito asked, curious and concerned. An island off the coast of Hai and Kaminari no Kuni where researchers are messing around with summoning beasts to create the ultimate one. They bit off more than they could chew and brought in a kunoichi to seal it. A red-haired kunoichi survivor from a certain clan of shinobi. Naruto provided from his shades searching the island for any documentation supporting his hope, hopefully conveying the urgency of the situation. Those who knew Naruto fell silent, understanding his behavior. Roshi, on the other hand, having experienced the Third Shinobi World War, knew exactly what the signs were pointing to. Why do you care if she's an Uzumaki survivor? He asked. Unlike a majority of Iwa, he didn't hate the Uzumaki, having outright refused taking part in the three-way siege on Uzushiogakure many years ago. My apologies, I left out a detail about myself when we arrived. My full name is Uzumaki Naruto, son of Uzumaki Kushina and the Yondaime Hokage, Naruto said. Oh, you're Minato's boy? I'd say there was a resemblance, but with your black hair and all that covering it's hard to tell. Roshi responded calmly. You don't care he's the son of Iwa's greatest enemy? Gaara asked, curious. Not a bit. I didn't lose anyone during his attack, and the sins of the father are not those of the son. The boy wasn't that bad, anyway. Roshi commented, reminiscing about the certain quality Minato had about him that brought many people to him. It was probably why the Raikage was a sort of friendly rival to him, in terms of speed, and why even as the Hokage with the shortest term, he was still well loved and remembered, though that may be in part to the whole Kyuubi thing. Interesting. I'm glad you are not clouded by hatred. I dealt with enough of that in Konoha. Naruto commented. Yo Naruto, shouldn't we be there? You said this kind of travel could get us quickly anywhere. Kurabi commented, only to receive a punch to the back of his head from Yugito. Naruto's brow furrowed in confusion and irritation. You're right, B-san, we should be there by now. I feel a sort of dampener on my powers. He commented just before they began to rise, having finally arrived. Han, on the other hand, was looking at the cursing Kurabi and sweat dropping. Is he always like this? He asked. Unfortunately. Gaara answered stoically, but there was a hint of irritation. They rose from the portal with a sensation of breaking through the surface of some oil-like substance, dragging down their forms as they appeared to a most grim scene. Blood was everywhere, and the various machines and containment cells were utterly destroyed. Strangely, there were no bodies to be found, but the slickness of the blood beneath their feet told them whatever occurred here was extremely recent. Nice to finally meet face to face. Father. The voice, like a man gritting his teeth in fury speaking through tar, drew their attention to a seemingly carefully constructed pile of debris, before what appeared to be liquid darkness oozed through the cracks until it was completely covered, a mound of light-absorbing black that seemed to pull their souls in the longer they stared. A humanoid form slowly grew from atop it, lanky and dripping with the inky darkness that most likely made up its form. It was shaped like the silhouette of a man with his arms at the sides, almost appearing to not have any, while its face was obscured by a series of blades embedded in its flesh like a crown or helmet visor. Any other facial features they could see were hidden by the darkness of its form, but they knew it was angry, furious, but not at them, or anything in particular. Just, angry. Who are you? Are you the cause of all this? And what did you mean by, father? Naruto asked. Yo Yugito, when did you and Naruto get busy? 'Cause if we got someone calling him dad, my head's getting dizzy. Kurabi commented. Shut up you idiot. Yugito punched Kurabi with a burning face. Not you, feckless host, the deep, dark, terrible black inside you. Onikage. The creature began to let off killing intent like a fierce wind, ruffling any loose hair or clothing. How do you know of the Onikage? Naruto asked lowly, eyes narrowed in curiosity. I am of the Onikage. I trust you could be bothered to learn of his climactic battle with the Jubi? The being asked almost rhetorically, slithering down the pile of debris to coalesce in a vantablack puddle on the floor, its humanoid proxy staring them down, its heavy, labored breaths unnerving them. I am the aftermath of that tumultuous meeting. An unholy meeting of flesh, blood, and darkness. Torn and spilt from primordial gods, and absorbed from the essence around me, a damnable existence came into being. A surface on the earth that would swallow all hope, blocking finite mortality and the oblivion, a skin. Then a bastardization of consciousness began to grow, tearing itself apart and mending back as the cloudy echoes and empty concepts of my progenitors fought for dominance. For millennia, I festered in nothing but agony and fury, learning to dull the pain by manipulating and taking in the darkness around, be it materialistic or metaphysical. The shadows of each blade of grass, of each pebble, of the trees, the animals, the humans, and the darkness in the hearts of all living creatures. It was mine to bend and assimilate. But even now, every fiber of my abominable being boils in pain, with no salve to soothe. I spent my time slaughtering and consuming creatures, manipulating the darkness, seeking not amend for my pain, but for my boredom. Time and again, I committed great works to alleviate it, great losses of life and events of destruction, nothing. Imagine my surprise when I felt a stirring in my mind not a week ago. One of my creators had taken a host, and within the container of one of the bastard shards of the other. Now here he is, creating a so-called network of sycophantic slaves and tracking down family. How sentimental. It finished its dialogue, and everyone had the succinct feeling that if it had a mouth, it would be smiling sardonically. Not liking where this was going, Naruto glared at the creature. What do you want? What's your name? He asked. I want for nothing. I need to destroy you all. Each of you are an abomination, mindless followers created by a disease of a being. I will destroy every last remnant of the Onikage and the Jubi, and you so foolishly gathered yourselves before me. I can search for the other two after I destroy you all. As for my name, you should know it. Just as I am connected to you and your network, you are connected to me. Everything you know, I know, and vice versa. The being provided, helpfully. Pretty hypocritical of you to call us abominations that need to be destroyed when you called yourself one not 1 minute ago. Yugito commented, fists on her hips. I can never die. I am a bastardization of primordial gods and the darkness in the hearts of man. As long as man exists, so will I. You six, however, are very mortal, and mortals are very fragile. The creature slid backwards slightly, the puddle that was its form slithering into the debris and parting the rocks as a large mass was pulled into its central form and raised up, revealing a humanoid figure. The creature had taken to sticking to its apparent hostage like a parasite, its skin over their face peeling back to reveal. Hinoka. Her red hair was held back by what remained of a white hairband, possibly torn from the battle with the beast and attempting to fight off this creature. Her dark eyes were filled with fear and confusion, and her mouth was held in grit disgust at the living tar sticking to her body, putting pressure on her various injuries. Everything happened so fast. The head researcher brought her in to begin the sealing process for what they called the ultimate summoning beast, but her fuinjutsu wasn't enough, and it broke free. It began killing the researchers and almost put her on that long list, were it not for this creature of living darkness eviscerating the beast, saving her. However, before she could get a word in, it fell upon her, and the fight was back on, but she was haggard, injured, and low on chakra. She barely lasted 5 minutes. Then the creature decided to amuse itself. 5 minutes ago, prior to Naruto and Ko's arrival, Hinoka was lying in the dark. Beneath the debris her savior turned assailant laid around her, moaning in pain and exhausted from her low reserves. She always had larger chakra coils than most other shinobi, so it was rare for her to face chakra exhaustion, but here she was. Thankfully she was a sensor, and using her ability required little chakra of her to use it. Attempting to reach outwards with what could only be described as a chakra sonar, she was interrupted by her captor. "Your friends are all dead. No one is coming for you." It taunted her with, "You're lying." Hinoka denied, returning to using her sensor ability to prove it wrong. Nothing. There was nothing. Her sensing ability, when pushed to its limits, could engulf nearly half the island, and there was nothing. The minor chakra signatures in the civilian researchers didn't show up in her mind's eye. "Do you see now? You are alone on this island. Save for me," the creature said. "Why?" Hinoka asked lowly, spirit waning. The head researcher was like a father to her, having informed her of her heritage as a survivor of a once great clan in the elemental nations. He raised her from the baby he found into the woman she was. And now he, and all their colleagues and friends, were gone. "You could have let them escape. It's clearly me you want. Why else would I still be alive?" she reasoned. "Yes, I could have." The being simply agreed. "Then why? Why did you kill them all?" Hinoka yelled. "Do you really want to know? Maybe I did it for a higher purpose you could never understand. Or maybe they're not dead, and are actually suffering eternally, subsumed within my being." The monster proposed. "What reason could you have for killing them?" Hinoka screamed, climbing to her knees. Almost immediately, the creature formed its humanoid proxy within her prison, growing so close she could feel its cold breath on her face. "There was no reason. They died because I wanted them to see if it would amuse me." It finally answered. "And did it? Are you satisfied?" Hinoka questioned, furious. The being tilted its head almost quizzically. "No. It was too easy." "What, did you want them to suffer? Is that what you want?" Hinoka wondered angrily. "Yes. That might be fun. Now quiet down. Your screeching is ruining my concentration on keeping your dearest family behind us." It complained. "What family? I'm the last Uzumaki, Kagami-san said so." Hinoka denied. "If it were so easy for a band of cockroaches to be exterminated, I would have done it myself. Instead, a handful of you slip away and go about your lives, ignorant of the world around you. The very reason you are still alive is because another of your blood, and in a sense mine, is coming. I suppose that sort of makes you my aunt. I was wrong, this was amusing." It commented with a sick cackle before sinking away. "What the hell are you talking about?" Hinoka yelled, confused and still angry. Flashback end. "Let her go," Naruto demanded lowly. "She's the reason you're here, correct? You seek to preserve your familial ties, connect with those of your blood. How sentimental." It commented sardonically, simultaneously forcing Hinoka to outstretch her arm. "Let her go," Naruto demanded, his voice and glare deadly. "What is my name?" The creature responded just the same. Hastily feeling inward for this supposed connection he shared with the spawn of darkness, Naruto found the bridge in question, but attempting to mentally cross it proved more difficult than he expected. It was purposely blocking him, forcing him to concentrate when his emotions were running rampant. "What do you want?" he yelled, hoping to buy time. "I want to see you and everyone like you lying before me in agony. I won't kill you. Until you awakened your damnable blood, I had no purpose. With you here, I finally have one. To pay you back for the millennia I suffered in agony and hatred. Now, what is my name?" It howled, Hinoka's grimacing face showing it was putting pressure on her arm, possibly intending to break it. I don't know. You're purposely blocking me, Naruto pointed out. Against a being with infinitely more time to train in its darkness manipulation than him, he stood no chance at penetrating any defenses it had, physical or mental. How intriguing for the child to be disappointed in the parent. I'd say I expected more from you, but I didn't. CRRK. AAAARRRMUUUUUUSSSS. Naruto roared over Hinoka's howl of pain, the harming of his family pushing him over the edge, tapping into the eldritch essence of the first Onikage sleeping within him. A being on par with a primordial god against a bastard child, cobbled together from bits and pieces, brought easy access to the now-named creature's mind, just as it did him. Armus, a strange name, taken from the mind of one of many foreigners from the Western lands. It had no meaning. It had no purpose. It was simply a label for an insane being to latch onto, a focus amongst the agony. But none of that mattered. Naruto liked to think he had a good grasp on his emotions, that he could channel any wayward fury or sorrow toward the systematic destruction of the perpetrator, Konoha vendetta notwithstanding, but he had never been furious, had never been buried in a hate so black it made Armus look like the sun, but here he was. Much like a Jinchuriki, Naruto's power could be fully tapped into when he immersed himself in emotion, and at the moment, he and the concept of anger were quite indistinguishable. Conscious thought, the ability to identify friend and foe, basic support of bodily needs and functions, all cast aside to immerse himself in the strength needed. Needed to make Armus hurt. Make him bleed. Make him stop being. Unfortunately for Naruto, he had passed through the earlier stage of fury and the calm lagoon of rage, where the voice was steady, the manner measured and polite, with nary a hint of the loathing underneath save for something that slipped through the cracks, like a hair out of place, or the repeated clenching of fists. No, he was beyond even that. He was a berserker, a creature of rage that would destroy any and all things, subconsciously knowing it would do nothing. Such was his hate that Naruto's entire upper body almost immediately transformed into that of the Onikages, the suddenness causing the blood vessels in various parts of his bodies to burst violently, molten pitch painting his body the same vantablack as his target and scorching the earth. The influence of the demon shadow began to dip south, converting Naruto's lower body so he was completely consumed, an armored skirt of similar material to his shawl-like plate slowly forming as cloth gave way to ebon flesh. Armus began to cackle with glee, casting Hinoka aside like a rag, causing her to almost land on her broken arm, were it not for Yugito zipping in to catch her, the Nibi Jinchuriki being below the radar of the combatants. Yes, father, this is what I've been waiting for. While losing yourself to these pesky emotional ties somewhat dulls my inevitable victory, I can get over it as I torture you for millennia to come. It declared, its black influence growing at its feet, in preparation for the battle to come. Sunshining her back to Gaara and Kurabi, Yugito set Hinoka down as gently as she could. Okay, on a scale of 1 to 10, how fucked is this situation? She asked almost rhetorically. Would it be in bad taste to say 10, what with all this mentioning of the Jubi? Gaara responded just the same. We need to fall back, possibly vacate the island. With Naruto the way he is, simply retreating to a distant chamber, or the facility in general, may not suffice. He said before either of them could answer his question. I always knew snubbing Iryu ninjutsu would come to bite me in the ass. Best we can do is put this in a splint and treat the rest of the injuries as best we can. Yugito commented, I suggest we do that after we go, otherwise we'll be in the crosshairs of Naruto. Kurabi commented in his own special way, drawing up a point. Hinoka was still conscious, so she would react quite understandably when they set it back, and her screams would put them in his firing line. Best to retreat through the shadows and tend to it afterwards. Nodding, and ignoring his rhyme, Gaara caressed Hinoka in his sand for maximum gentleness before they all sunk in their collective shadow, vacating the island and leaving Naruto to his battle. Gra! Naruto roared, appearing before Armus in a black blur, fist reared back for an attack, his arms having gone through another transformation. Armus, being a less than solid being, merely splattered across his currently giant fist like the substance he appeared to be before flying off with the momentum, coalescing a ways away, looking over his opponent's new form and going over his fragmented mental library from the original Onikage. Expectedly, Naruto was incomplete. Even as his lower body began to transform, what would be the final result was a mere shell of the true demon whose blood Naruto inherited. Half of it was from his inexperience, and half from his emotions getting the better of him right now. Naruto's arms were about 4 times as large as they normally were, and similar to those he used against the Nei shinobi, yet also different. They appeared to be made of separate, overlapping plates of armor, but they looked particularly metallic, as opposed to the previous organic-looking armor. His black ichor was slipping between the plates and mingling with the contained, yet unstable chakra, creating a deadly crimson glow between them, and the snarling visage of a demon atop his arms. The excess dripping from his fingers as though from a fresh, and violent, kill. Armus knew those limbs well enough. They were a technique forged from a particularly large demon known for using his foul chakra as a sort of propellant, taking a great many lives and tearing up the land in his wake. Lacking in brains, the Onikage didn't even need to strategize in order to defeat it, turning his soul into an ability that would be used properly and effectively. Highly doubtful this half-breed could do the same in his current mindset. You aren't the only one to have amassed an army, but just like you, they are abominations, forged from the hearts of human beings, while mine are blessed purity. The darkness around us is mine to bend. Armus brought up, as the shadows within the complex became infinitely darker, an inescapable black just like his skin, before bulging and forming his supposed superior shades. Unlike Naruto's, they lacked any definable characteristics that might denote their human origins, appropriate considering their abstract formation. Instead, they more closely resembled a cross between some sort of demon and ghouls, while the darkness that formed them had a center of bubbling white, similar to when Naruto used his Biju or Boden chakra. Mostly smooth heads lacking lower jaws and instead bearing a pair of fanged mandibles below the top row of most likely razor-sharp teeth. These broad-shouldered phantasms bore many appendages on their backs that seemed akin to spider legs, but they weren't being used for transportation, as the ghouls were content to float above the floor, a trio of thick and most likely prehensile tentacles replacing their lower bodies. They all had 4 arms, the top pair ending in large scythe-like blades that they kept folded along their backs for later use, the lower pair ending in hooked claws that looked quite painful. Shrieking like banshees, the horde of wraiths burst forward akin to a swarm, Naruto meeting them halfway with a fury-fueled roar and burst of a combination of crimson chakra and black blood from vent-like protrusions on the backs of his large arms, disproving Armus' theory that Naruto would be able to use them to their full extent in this state. Slamming the entirety of the closest wraith's chest with his fist sent it flying, and Naruto jumped over the horizontal slash of a second, attempting a heel drop only to be met by the mess of appendages on its back crossing each other for a block before it attempted to impale him from below with its bladed arms. Roaring and punching downward, Naruto buffeted its attack violently and pushed himself up slightly before blasting back down for a double stomp, bisecting it from the force of his drop, only for the tentacle legs to attach to his shadow and bind his legs, allowing the other 8 creatures to swoop in. Slamming the central mass into a fine paste, the enraged reincarnation of the Onikage suffered only several slices to his person instead of dismember. Oh, there goes his arm. Well shit. Just as I thought. You speak of being the scion of the Onikage, yet you are harmed by creatures of his realm. I had thought this would at least be amusing to see you rage against your inevitable demise, but you disappoint me even in that respect. Armus commented from his perch atop the debris caging Hinoka, almost seeming to lounge on it. Naruto, in his rage-addled mind, proceeded to metaphorically flip Armus the bird by rearing his stump back as if he still had a fist to use, and punched out a wraith that believed the same, chakra and blood propelling his newly regrown arm fast enough to splatter the creature like ink, while the detached arm began to move as if it had a body attached to it climbing up, and formed an entirely separate clone of Naruto, Onikage influence and all. By this time, the conversion of human to demonic demigod was complete, and his legs matched the rest of his flesh, save for his enlarged arms. The organic armor of his legs was shaped almost like greaves, indicative of such by the slightly wider knees tapering down the legs and the plates interlocking in such a way that what appeared to be a spine was down the center of the shin, and spikes lined his calves, his bare feet bearing clawed toes. The armored skirt, about shin length in the front and back and hip length on the sides, appeared to be made of the same unearthly stone material as his shawl, bearing the glowing Onikage symbol on the front and a ring of spikes around the waist. Had he had eyes, Armus would be glaring at Naruto inquisitively. So, he's adapting, using a different kind of darkness. Not of light, but of sight, perspective. Since he isn't invulnerable like the original Onikage, he's unconsciously using the darkness around us to both heal himself and the limb into a separate entity rather than simply the former. Nothing I do will dampen his ability to manipulate the shadows while he's like this. Since he'll most likely defeat these wraiths at this rate, I must prepare myself. Even using his bloodkin as a shield won't work. He'd probably kill her if I did that. And while that sounds amusing, it will not benefit me. If he recognizes what he did, he might get worse, and while entertaining, he may tap into his true power. Then this'll be a problem. He thought to himself, pulling the darkness around him inward for his supposed preparation. Naruto and his clone began to systematically destroy the wraiths, their combined blood rage too much for the superior shades as they had no self-preservation instinct or tactics, tanking through their attacks and returning it tenfold. Hua-a-a-r-r-r-g-g-g-h-h-h. One of the Narutos actually created some kind of void release technique in its mouth, pulling in the remaining 3 wraiths, the ambient darkness around them, and even the clone itself, consuming the shadows. What color could be seen from the environment around them seemed to be drained, momentarily leaving them in a world of gray before reality righted itself. Rather than exhale the darkness as some form of attack, he fell onto his arms, echoing his battle with the Sanbi what felt like a lifetime ago, and the pods on his back folded open almost like the wing shells of insects, smoking pitch wafting from them in 6 straight lines, before his blood rose up like a thing alive and stormed around them, solidifying as more arms, each those he donned against the Sanbi, 6 blazing eyes glaring at Armus in blind fury. As Naruto glared, Armus seemed to bleed away into the background, becoming it as he resupplied the darkness Naruto took, expanding his influence like the presence of a god. Since this is the only thing you understand, let me reciprocate, father. A hand the width of the entire room grew from the wall as if buried within, even though the wall was separating 2 rooms. Charging an orb of unstable crimson chakra in each of his hands and his mouth, Naruto prepared to obliterate the giant hand, chakra cloak bubbling to the surface around him, but constantly shifting as if it couldn't maintain itself. The hand loomed forward like a rolling boulder, intent on crushing him. Hai no Kuni mainland, apologizing under her breath as Hinoka hissed and growled in pain as they set her arm. Yugito wiped the sweat from her forehead once her work was done, unable to admire her work when a violent tremor shook her form, and the earth itself. Wide eyes darting to the east, she saw something that forced a frozen mass to drop in her stomach. The facility, the island, and nearly half a mile of ocean around it were all engulfed in a massive ebon pillar that pierced the heavens, pushing the waters back with pure force. With the lot of them, minus Hinoka, staring at it for over a minute, they deduced it wasn't going anywhere. Naruto ooh. Yugito howled, tears streaming from her eyes, as she attempted to cross the sea on foot, only for a lightning-enhanced chop to the back of her neck to stop her in her tracks, an unusually serious Kurabi catching her. I doubt he's dead, but we can't do nothing for the boss. We gotta make tracks, find somewhere to hole up. This way above our pay grade. B said, Gaara nodding in agreement after he got over his surprise at the lack of any rhyme. All the while, the black pillar of energy remained. Where can we go? How long do you think he'll be in there? Gaara asked as he used his sand to carry Yugito and Hinoka. I know a place we can use where no one'll bother us. As for how long, can't say. Let's hope it ain't too long. Kurabi said as he headed north. We're gonna have to skirt the southern coast till we can get close to where we gotta go. Come on, Sandman, shouldn't keep the girls waitin'. He advised, with a final glance at the pillar where his friend was surely fighting Armus. Gaara followed Kurabi, the unconscious girls in tow. Don't make us wait too long, Naruto. This isn't a group that can last long without a leader. He prayed. 8 years later. A lot happened in 8 years. And a lot didn't. Considering the Onikage metamorphosis sped their bodies up to their peak physical conditions, the 5 shadow shinobi did not age a single second. Hinoka, on the other hand, aged into a fine young woman. Once she came to hours after they retreated, she demanded answers. Who were they? Where were they? Where was that other man? What the hell happened at the facility? Why was that woman crying? Gaara and Kurabi answered as best they could, going uninjured the whole time since Yugito was preoccupied. She learned their names, who they were in relation to the greater elemental nations. Heck, the brother and niece of the Raikage and son of the Cage. Where they currently were, a sort of safe house island Kurabi had access to, and what they were. Not human. To explain that, they needed to bring up Naruto. Uzumaki Naruto. Her family. Probably the last one, save for her. They shared his story, how he was hated in Konoha for containing the Kyuubi, how he died not too long ago. And how he was reborn. The blood of a powerful demon, impossibly old and impossibly strong, coursed through his veins somewhere deep inside. The Kyuubi's chakra, fluctuating from a killing blow, vitalized the blood and turned him into something great and powerful, terrifying and ancient. The Onikage. With powers of darkness and shadow, he cut a swath out of Konoha, eventually happening upon Yugito, pulling her and Kurabi along his journey for, regrettably, revenge. Stringing Gaara in as well, but giving him the freedom he was denied in his own home village. Finally, they took to the west, and took in Han and Roshi. Then, when they were next going somewhere, Naruto suddenly looked like someone shat in his cereal. These words, of course, and they showed up at the facility, much too late. After the beast triggered Naruto's latent power by breaking her arm, all hell broke loose. Naruto became a berserker. Armus showed his true power, and the last thing they saw was the island and a bit of the ocean around it explode in a black pillar. That pillar lasted for 4 years before finally fizzling out. There was no sign of Naruto or Armus. With the Shade Network still up, under Gaara's supervision, they kept finding echoes around the nations, something just on the edge of the creature's senses. It was something dark, but they couldn't tell what kind of dark. Naruto's dark was familiar, powerful but welcoming to them. Anyway, Armus' dark was oppressive and carried the intent to wipe away all life. This dark was something new, something in between, yet nothing like either. It confused them. Hinoka decided to stay with the 5 of them, hoping she'd run into her family again. Her arm healed right up in a matter of months. Kurabi didn't change much on the surface. He spent most of the time writing in his notepad about his stupid rhymes, laughing at his own jokes here and there. But everyone could tell he was just as worried about Naruto as the rest of them. Gaara immersed himself in training in his darkness manipulation, hoping to bury these complex emotions, only to be faced with them when he ran out of ideas to test out. He had never missed someone, was never sad when they were gone, never hoped they would return. Having finally been given comrades through Naruto, he didn't want to return to that life of loneliness. Han and Roshi weren't as affected by Naruto's disappearance as the others, since they had only just joined, but Roshi could respect and mourn the loss of someone with great potential. Yet his old bones told him Naruto wasn't dead, that he would return. And very soon. Yugito. It was heartbreaking to see her. During the first 4 years, she cried herself to sleep most of the time, other times simply being unable to sleep. Considering their bodies were no longer strictly human, that was the only thing keeping her health from declining. She rarely ate or drank, let alone spoke. When the pillar of darkness dissipated 4 years ago, everyone saw a window into the woman she used to be. Lively, hopeful for Naruto's return, slowly gaining her bubbliness. But when he didn't return, she fell back into a slump. Not even Matabi's consoling words helped her. Knock knock knock. Everyone jumped and spun to face the door to their safe house, even Yugito. Their safe house where absolutely no one knew where it was or that they were there. Hinoka set up seals around the perimeter that hid their chakra signatures, and no one without an affinity to darkness could sense them through the seals. Knock knock knock. Everyone made eye contact and gave subtle nods before Gaara slowly approached the door. His Suna no Yoroi would protect him from initial attacks if this was an assassin while the others captured them. Reaching for the doorknob, Gaara looked through the corner of his eye to see everyone prepared to grab whoever was behind the door. Seeing this, he gave a final nod and swung the door open. The 5 blurs of his compatriots shot through the doorway, grabbed the person in question, and ducked back inside, the door closing silently in case he was a scout sent ahead. Hinoka holding a pair of kunai to his throat while the others had a limb sheathed in their respective dark elements very close to his person. The supposed enemy was a young boy with shoulder-length, tousled blonde hair, his alarmed gray eyes poking through the bangs over and around his face. He wore a lavender long-sleeved shirt with a green scarf around his neck, black pants held up by a brown belt, and normal black shoes. Hello? He greeted meekly. Who are you? How'd you find us? Are you with anyone else? Yugito demanded, shadow claws held over his chest. Okay, I can see how this looks. My name's Menma. Well, it's probably not, but I forgot my old name, long story. My friend lead me to you, and he's with me, it's just us. The boy answered, almost laughably calm in his current situation. Who is your friend? Did he send you ahead as a scout? Roshi asked, his tone more tempered and wary. That requires some explanation, which also necessitates my freedom. Can you let me go? I swear to you I am not an enemy, if anything, I'm a messenger. Menma said, a bead of sweat dripping down the side of his face. Everyone glared at him, but after a subtle nod from Gaara, who subtly used his sand on the boy's clothes to gauge his chakra reserves and heart rate, they weren't primed and fervent like a lying enemy. They let him go and stepped back, but made sure to surround him. Who is your friend, and how did he lead you to us? We haven't interacted with people in the past 8 years. Gaara inquired. Rather than answer, Menma closed his eyes and calmed his breathing before going stock still. Everyone noticed a second pair of hands knit their way between his fingers, and they jumped into stances in case it was a jutsu, only for every fiber of their beings to rise on end when the boy seemed to spin inward upon himself, becoming engulfed in a cloud of darkness that lingered like a smoky aura, changing shape and size entirely moments later. Then it hit them. The overwhelming power, as if they were dropped into the ocean, filled the safe house. Those who were capable of thought at this moment feared it pierced Hinoka's seals due to its strength. Crimson slits stabbed through the darkness, and an all-too-familiar symbol appeared around Menma's forehead, the finer details of stark white teeth and horns cementing the wonderful truth. Naruto had returned. Please contain yourselves. Naruto's familiar voice, distant and airy, shook them from their stupors. Tears long thought run dry spilled from Yugito's, and she couldn't contain herself enough to not throw herself at him, ignoring his grunt of surprise and slight pain as she attempted to crush his ribs. Please say this is real. Please don't let this be another dream, she whispered, arms phasing through her grip. Naruto held her close and looked down on her with fond, if guilty, eyes. It's real, Yugi-chan, I'm here. I'm sorry for making you wait, all of you. How long has it been? Clinging to an amnesiac has its cons, obviously. Naruto asked his friends as he consoled Yugito. 8 years. Gaara answered simply, Naruto wincing as if struck. What happened? He asked. I lost myself. Naruto answered before looking at a suddenly nervous, fidgeting Hinoka. I don't know why. We had only just met. All I knew was your name and facts in a journal. But the second your arm broke, I stopped being me and became a beast, incapable of thinking, only destroying. I stayed like that for 4 years, Armis and I fought all that time. That entire time, I was drowning in a sea of blood, the Onikage's blood that I forced to the surface, to give myself the strength to eradicate him. But it wasn't enough. He was an age-old creature of darkness and chakra, while I was basically a child throwing a tantrum, albeit a child with unfathomable power over darkness and, at the time, his own body, but a child nonetheless. I'm pretty sure I was dismembered at least 1,000 times over those 4 years. 1,000 times I simply roared through just to attack him. As you can see, that came back to bite me in the ass. He gestured down to his less than solid form, a cloud of darkness in the shape of a man, and when they looked closely at his face, they noticed his skin became translucent and they could see his skeleton in patches. It was only after those 4 years did I finally break through the haze of my anger. Unfortunately, that was also when Armis tired of our physical plane and pulled me into the realm of darkness to continue our fight, if you can call it that. He added, the pillar. Gaara's voice interrupted. 4 years ago, the pillar disappeared. That must have been when you were pulled to the other side. He surmised. A pillar? I can only theorize that was from one of the many explosions during our battle. What was left when it disappeared? Naruto asked, obviously ignorant of the goings-on of the outside world while he was fighting Armis. Ocean. Roshi answered. The facility and the island it was on were gone, as if they were erased from the planet. I'll bet that was fun for everyone to deal with. Naruto commented, referring more to the greater elemental nations than his little group, who probably didn't care beyond wondering about him and Armis. Konoha's council tried to raise a stink about it, calling it an attack by Kumo, while the Raikage felt it had to do with you and just drank his night away. Gaara informed him. Why me? Naruto inquired petulantly. It was black and an explosion. Gaara answered simply. If he could, Naruto would blush mildly in embarrassment. During their little dialogue, he had a thought that about him. Well, anyway, once we were in the darkness, our abilities were heightened to new levels, but I was overwhelmed by the power and suffered many blows from Armus, who had taken to play with me. Since I was now on conscious thought instead of instinct, it got interesting. I had to rely on my wits and ability to dodge his attacks. Why me and run like a bitch? Kurabi chose that moment to speak. Gaara, on it. A limb made of black sand formed behind Gaara and slapped B in the back of his head, nearly dislodging his sunglasses. Thank you. Anyway, long story short, I eventually came to the conclusion that I couldn't actually beat him, and I was left with one thing to do. I had to seal him away. Unfortunately, I wasn't proficient enough in Fuinjutsu to do it the traditional way, and I didn't exactly have anything to seal him in, so I had to do it the hard way. Naruto said before gently pushing Yugito back and reaching for his nearly imperceptible coat and opening it to reveal what he meant. In the cloud of darkness that was his form, a scab of soul-crushing black revealed itself to them, a vast majority of his stomach, chest, and even up his face to connect just under his left eye, replaced by what they could surmise as Armus himself. Faint roars and heavy breathing reaching their ears as his bladed face crest grew out of the puddle in Naruto's skin before sinking back into a rise somewhere else. What on earth have you done? Roshi asked. I ate him. I lined a wound he scored on my body with teeth, grabbed him, and sewed him into my body as he continued to attack. I'm fairly sure I blacked out a few times from the pain. While the teeth needles bound him to my body, the darkness inside my got to work inside. Armus himself gave me the tools to consume him. It was only our present location that allowed me to continue to bind us together. What he tore away, I replenished from the air around us. The will of an avatar of hatred against the determination of a hopeless fool. Obviously, I was only partially successful. Naruto gestured to his smoky form. My injuries caught up with me, and I am left as something not quite dead yet not truly alive, teetering on the edge once I finally escaped. For some reason, I appeared around Sora no Kuni, where I ran into Menma. When I first ran into him, after he jumped off a cliff, he had amnesia, so I clung to his shadow without his knowledge. Over time, his memories returned, and he remembered he was a member of a gang of bandits, and he sought to atone for his sins. That was when I revealed myself to him. Long story short, he saw bringing me to U-Lot as a way towards that, helping an injured person and all. He's a good kid. But then we ran into a snag. Naruto's tone took a dive, almost mournful. Why'd I get the feeling this is going to get sad? Yugito asked. Naruto spread his arms out as a display of his form, not quite solid, not quite there. I'm dying like this. Too much power in one body, too much life force spent fighting and holding him in and being this parasite. He sounded tired and full of self-loathing. Clinging to Menma is only delaying the inevitable. If I don't do something, I am to be lost to the darkness, a part of the natural world. My only hope is Menma. In bonding with him to be here, I've doomed him. He's tied to me like the Kyuubi before, or rather, I am to him as such. Only I am using his life force to sustain myself. He knows and gave me consent, but not like this. This isn't how I wanted to come back, piggybacking off a young boy's life. The worst part is, he's okay with it, and I can't think of anything to stop it. He fell back, sitting on the table in the middle of the room. Is there anything that can be done? Gaara asked, understanding that Naruto did not wish to take the life of someone who has barely just started living. I have an idea or two. That's all for now. If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments.